Well, let's go ahead and get started. So, thank you all very much for coming to today's session. Thank you for bearing with us while we try to figure out a little bit of the technology here. Um, I wanted to welcome you all on behalf of Christine Darden. This session is meant to coincide with the Christine Darden lecture that will take place on Friday afternoon. So this session is called the African American Women and the Mathematics of Flight. So I do want to thank the five speakers that we have lined up for today. Thank you very much for agreeing to give the talk here. This is certainly a special thing for me. I'm just really happy that everybody agreed to get the sessions here. So first up, we have Ranthony Edmonds, who is on the faculty at, the Ohio State University, and she'll give us a talk here on highlighting the hidden legacy of Eunice Gray Smith. So Dr. Edmonds, it's all yours.
Okay. So press time, so be respectful of everyone's time. So first, I just want to thank, Edre and Dr. Darden. Thank you so much for the invitation to participate in this session. It feels really special and important to talk about African-American women and the mathematics of flight. And then thank you for all of you who are joining in the audience today virtually. Like Dr. Goen said, my name is Ranthony Edmonds. I'm a postdoctoral scholar at The Ohio State University in Columbus, Ohio. And today I just want to give a talk that highlights someone whose story I feel is somewhat hidden, even amongst the hidden figures, and that is Eunice Gray Smith. Oh, okay. Next. So I wanted to, before I talk about Eunice Gray Smith, I wanted to just kind of quickly share how I came to learn about and become invested in the Hidden Figures story. So when I was in graduate school, after I passed my comprehensive exam, I was gifted the text by Margot Shetterly, Hidden Figures. And I was just immediately drawn to this story of these Black women mathematicians who had contributed so much to the United States' early space program, despite the social climate with respect to their race and gender. And I was just very inspired. A couple years later, towards the end of graduate school, I was able to meet Dr. Christine Darden. She was a keynote speaker at the Field of Dreams conference. And I brought my Hidden Figures book and she signed it. And I've taken a picture of the quote. And this could be a standard phrase she uses when signing all textbooks. But for me, especially finishing up my dissertation, this note from her to stay inspired to complete your work was just really encouraging. And, after the movie came out and more people found themselves becoming interested and inspired by the story, I knew I wanted to find some way to incorporate it into my teaching. And so this is just a course flyer of a course that I developed with my colleague, John Johnson. It's a service learning course in the Department of Mathematics here at OSU. And, the course uses the Hidden Figures story to discuss diversity, equity, and inclusion in mathematics, as well as scientific innovation during the space race and the origins of the aeronautics industry in the United States. And the book that we had our students read, it focuses on many individuals aside of sort of the three main women that you see in the movie, and then also Dr. Darden. And so we came to learn and highlight a lot of other noteworthy mathematicians whose stories, weren't featured in the film. And one of these individuals was Eunice Gray Smith. So Eunice Gray Smith was a human computer at Langley Research Center. She worked there for 40 years and had a prolific career. She was a Virginia native. She attended public schools in the city of Portsmouth, Virginia, and her father worked as in the Norfolk Navy Yard. He managed boilers and steam-powered ships. And then she graduated from high school and segregated schools within the city of Portsmouth. And later she attended Hampton Institute, which is now known as Hampton University, which is a historically Black college in Hampton, Virginia. And this was just 30 minutes away from her hometown of Portsmouth. And there she earned a bachelor's degree in mathematics. So the Hidden Figures story is based on the human computers who were working at Langley. And the Black women there worked in a segregated group called West Computing, and that began in 19 43. And so when Eunice Gray Smith graduated, they were hiring. And so she was one of the very first women to work in this segregated unit. She went on to author 6 technical reports. And this is really important because when you look into, the archives and you try to figure out who was working, how many women, there actually are no existing personnel records from the beginning of her tenure at NACA. And so this authorship that she was able to obtain has really, allowed us to preserve her legacy. The author Margot Shetterly of The Hidden Figures story learned about her through interviewing coworkers. There's a series of interviews where Katherine Johnson mentions her close friendship with Eugene Gray Smith, and she was also close friends with Dr. Christine Darden. And so she ended her career. She retired in 1984. She was the youngest of 7 children. She had a son herself. His name was Aaron Wade Smith. He preceded her in death. He was a sociologist of race and race relations at Arizona State University before he passed away. And she passed away at the age of 82 in Newport News, Virginia. And so she stayed in this area throughout her life. And I'm sorry, I can't see the screen for questions. And so if you have them, I won't be able to look at them until the end. So I wanted to just give a little bit of context for Eunice's pathway through NACA. So most people today know of NASA. So the human computers in this segregated West Computing group, they began work at NACA. So this is the National Advisory Council on Aeronautics. It was a very small organization that grew into what we know now today as NASA. And the transition from NACA to NASA happened in 1958. And so the way that women were promoted, the human computers, is that they sort of attached themselves permanently to some sort of engineering group of men. And so when it came to around 1958, the original West Computing group, there were only about 9 women left, of which Eunice Smith was one. And so many of the others had gone on, Katherine Johnson, Mary Jackson, and had already been offered permanent positions with different engineering groups. And so the branches and divisions that you see here are really highlighting where they went. So Mary Jackson, for instance, the first Black female engineer, she worked in the supersonic tunnels branch, and they conducted tests on sort of Apollo capsules and things like that during this time period. Dorothy Vaughan, who sort of retooled herself in computational, with her computational skills, moved on to the analysis and computation division. And this was sort of created to service all the sensor computing and operation needs for NASA. And so you see the advent of, this transition from human computers to actual computers. The Space Task Group is where Katherine Johnson lived. This was a group that was sort of a brain trust, and it drew from the Flight Research Division and what was called the Pilotless Aircraft Research Division. And the Ground Loads Branch division is where Eunice Smith went. And so they did a lot of, they conducted a lot of research on forces on airplanes with respect to different types of loading systems, et cetera. And then down here, the Goddard Space Flight Center, this is where, we'll have a talk later today, but this is where Dorothy Hoover spent some time during her career. So you see this sort of with the National Space Act of 1958, NACA becomes NASA, and then the remaining West Computing unit is disbanded. There are no longer segregated units within NASA, and all the women sort of go in different places. And so because Eunice Smith went to this ground loads branch as opposed to the ACD or the Space Task Group or some of the other hidden figures in the story were, she wasn't included as much in the movie because the nature of her work was just very different. So I talked about authorship, which was very important. If you've seen the Hidden Figures movie, there's a scene where Katherine Johnson is trying to put her name on a technical report. And as I noted, because Eunice Smith, was only sort of found out about through historical and oral history interviews, without these research reports, we wouldn't have a good sense of the work that she did. The records that were kept during that time period, especially for the human computers, were very classified. There's not a lot of records of their work. And so these research reports kind of highlight this is what they were doing and when. And it was a very big deal for women to be co-authors on reports. So here you can kind of see the sort of trajectory of the type of work that she did in the ground loads division. So she looked a lot at how different things affected the behavior of aircrafts. And so NACA, which turned to NASA, was very much concerned with how do we make things fly. So her division and the group that she was interested in was looking at the effects of different, loads that planes carried, et cetera, and how they operated. And so I wanted to talk a bit about this very first publication, just to kind of give a taste of some of the research and what it might have looked like. But here I just really wanted to emphasize that being a co-author of a research report was a very high accomplishment for any woman within Langley Research Center, and especially for Black women during that time period, because it gives you, like those who are in academia still now, it gives a record of the things that you were doing and when. Okay. So her first technical report was called the Aircraft Tire Behavior During High-Speed Operations in Soil. And so essentially, what was the issue? So they were trying to optimize the design of aircrafts. So in this particular instance, they wanted to be able to optimize the design of an aircraft that could maneuver smoothly in some sort of way over different types of runways. So let's say you have something that is unpaved, or you have to kind of hastily come up with a runway or airfield, perhaps in an emergency. They wanted to understand, how do we design a plane that's going to work well on these different surfaces in terms of takeoff and landing. And so, and especially before this, planes were becoming heavier and faster. Before this research report, most of the aircrafts were really light and slow. And so these different conditions weren't as much of an issue. So what they wanted to do was to investigate the soil-tire interactions of high ground speeds associated with aircraft operations. And so essentially, they wanted to find some way, if a plane is going at a certain speed that's quite high, so this is probably around a little over 100 miles an hour, what is the effect of the runway material? What type of soil, is going to impact that plane and its speed and drag, et cetera. And so this is what they were investigating in this report. And they created sort of a testing program in the Langley Loadings Track to explore reactions of tires on different types of soils. So when I say different types of soils, there were several different conditions. So the first is that they had 4 different types of clay test beds. So, and these different types of clay vary depending on their moisture content. And then they had 1 sand test bed. And so what they had were instruments that allow them to sort of detect different things with respect to the tire movement and pressure on these different types of soils. And so when I talk about speed, these planes were traveling, the testing facility simulated planes traveling almost 110 miles per hour. And then they also were looking at differences in inflation pressures of the tire, whether it be free rolling or kind of locked wheel braking, or kind of if it was cornering. So one thing I wanted to highlight is this idea of rut depth. So here's just kind of a crude image of what we mean by this. So you have your surface, and then you kind of have a rut in it. So the rut depth is going to be the difference between the elevation at the before and after the test run. So if you're moving, these tires over this soil, different soil areas, how deep of an impression is being made in different conditions at different speeds with different tire pressures. So there are a lot of different experiments going on. And there are a lot of different tools that they were using. So in this case, to determine the rut depth, They were using something called a profilometer, as well as sort of a level and rod and level survey technique with like a bar. And so it was very much a hands-on endeavor. And so even though this is during a time period where there's an advent of more computational things and devices at NASA, you still sort of need to be able to do these numbers, to crunch these numbers to get the results that you want. So let's see. Okay, so I just wanted to kind of show an example of what this sort of setup looked like. So what you have was sort of this, and this kind of keeps popping up, but this is what their sort of testing facility looked like. And I wrote down really explicit notes about how to explain this. But basically, they sort of developed this like towing apparatus. So this is something that was capable of sort of having a test carriage of a mass of almost up to 100,000 pounds. And this is what you see sort of here. They had this water jet test apparatus. And what it would do is it would move down this track that they had created. And as you see here, there's a soil test bed. This is where they would change out the different types of soils. They had a piece of concrete runway as sort of like a norm. They had a laboratory set up very close to the track, a soil processing area. So you have like here, this is simulating the weight and speed of a plane. And so the tire would be here. I hope you can see this. When I say here, this means something. There's a little green dot, teal. And so this tire would run over the concrete runway and then into this soil test bed. And this is where they were doing their measurements. And then they had gear to help it slow down. So this is sort of the test setup for what they were doing. And here's just an image from the report. So many NASA technical reports would be maybe 20 to 30 pages in length, but then the actual images, the graphs, everything else could sometimes total 100 pages. They were very thorough in examining everything. And so this particular graph shows the effect of changing clay strengths. So you have a clay that has 1.6 strength to compare it to 2.0 strength, and on the average rut depths for a tire. So when we say average rut depths, they had different sort of places where they would take these measurements and then they would sort of average them all together. And this was imprecise. Well, it was imperfect, but it was the best system that they had. And so here's just a sample of language from the report where, you know, upon this observation, they noted that the penetration of the soil beyond the clay with a strength of 2.0 was insignificant. And so this would suggest that, you know, this particular tire load combination, there wouldn't be any issues for a plane operating at this speed for clay soil as long as it had a strength of stronger than 3.2. So this was really important because they could use this information to advise, you know, those who were perhaps in emergency situations, how to proceed given the type of clay or the type of situation they found themselves in terms of the earth, in terms of launching and landing. Okay, so next. And I had a couple more remarks about the actual report itself, but I just wanted to sort of end by talking a little bit about her engagement in service. So in general, these women sort of did a lot of things. So one, you have like Eunice Gray Smith, who, you know, was one of the very first human computers. She worked at Langley Research Center for the West Computing Group that was segregated. And then she was moved to the Ground Loads Group, where she did a lot of work looking at effects of, you know, anti-skidding brakes and things on planes and things like this. And then they also were very engaged in community and service. And so I think about, you know, this teacher-scholar model that we all sort of strive towards for those in academia and even those at the high school and K through 12 level of, you know, scholarship, teaching, and service. And these women, and particularly Eunice Smith, embodied all of that. And so I've highlighted a couple of organizations that she was a part of. She was a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. This is the first Black traditional Black Greek leather organization in the United States, formed in 1908. And her, Christine Darden, Mary Jackson, Dorothy Vaughan, Katherine Johnson, they were all members of this sorority, and they had an active alumni chapter in Newport News, Virginia. And she alternated being president while, also conducting her research at Langley Research Center. She was also a member of the National Technical Association. This is a professional organization for Black engineers and scientists. She was a part of the Federal Women's Program and served alongside Mary Jackson in this capacity. So this program in particular was sort of established by President Johnson, and it added sex as a prohibited form of discrimination. So they were focused on identifying barriers to hiring and advancement of women in workplaces. And then lastly, she was a very active member of her church. She was in the senior choir, the trustee board, the building fund committee. She served as a church treasurer for a period. And so just very active in her community, in addition to being very active at work in research projects. And so I just wanted to close there and just give a flavor of her life. I want to include my contact information. And I also wanted to plug what Dr. Goins was noting, is that Christine Darden's inaugural lecture is going to be this Friday from 3 to 3:50 Mountain Standard Time. And I'm really excited about it, and I hope to see most of you all there. So I'll pause, and I'm not sure if there's time for questions, given that we got started a bit late, but I do appreciate everyone for attending.
Okay. Yeah, Dr. Edmonds, thank you very much. That was a wonderful talk. So at least I'll put up my hands for applause. I'm not sure other people will be doing the same, but I certainly hope so. I'm going to look here in the chat window for a few questions if they come up. Let's see. I just want to make sure. Ranthony, can you hear me okay? So it looks like Tasha
Yes.
said that she cannot. Okay, excellent. I want to maybe ask a couple of questions just to get started. But yeah, we certainly don't have a lot of time here. I'm curious as to why we've never heard about Eunice Smith. It sounds like that she was very much in the same circle as Dorothy Vaughan, Mary Jackson, Christine Darden, Katherine Johnson. But why haven't we heard about Eunice Smith the same way that we've heard about some of these other remarkable women?
I think, and if I think I'm still sharing screen, and then I'll stop. I think it has a lot to do with where she was working. Mainly the Space Task Group, the Supersonic Tunnels Branch, this ACD division, these are all divisions primarily focused on these early space missions. How do we get to space? Some of these other divisions, like the Goddard Flight Center, this Ground Loads Branch, they're doing more traditional research just on planes themselves. And so I think when we talk about the space race and who was doing research that was spicy, for lack of a better word, it's going to be the women who are highlighted in the Hidden Figures text, because their work directly contributed to, us in these early space missions, whereas Eunice Grace Smith's work was really valuable, but in a different setting. And so I think one reason she's not mentioned too much in the story is because her work was just distinct from the other Hidden Figures, so there wasn't a good fit. But I really wanted to highlight her because she's noted a lot as, Katherine Johnson's close friend, her best friend, and that's sort of how she's contextualized. But then when you look into her work, you realize that she had a really prolific career in her own right. And so I wanted to honor that and highlight a little bit of her work.
Great. In fact, with those connections, I really enjoyed that you actually mentioned that they were all AKAs. My mom's an AKA, so I hear about this all the time. So I was really happy to hear that there's that connection there. Here's one question from Elaine Terry. Was Eunice Smith classified as an engineer or a mathematician?
I believe that she was a mathematician. I believe that most of the, so don't quote me though, but I do believe that she was classified as a mathematician. I wasn't able to find sort of what rank, et cetera, but that's also because the personnel records for her just aren't reliable, because I haven't been able to find any. So most of the accounts from her are from stories, oral histories, interviews, and in those settings, they don't tend to talk about her specific rank and these sorts of things within the center. But I would lean towards saying that she was a mathematician. because she didn't, like I said, most of the women who paired off into different divisions with engineers, Mary Jackson was able to assume that title, but I think that she probably remained a mathematician within the Langley Research Center.
Right. Well, I want to ask maybe one last question. This is going back to what you just said a moment ago about how maybe she started with kind of the space race and then she kind of went to a slightly different direction. My understanding is that the United States was more concerned with these rockets that would literally go up and come back down. But it sounds like Eunice Smith was starting to work with things rolling on land, you know, like kind of tire and soil and what have you. So maybe going from rockets to more aircraft. Do you know why she was working on this? Why she wasn't working on the rockets part? Was this just something that NASA was more interested in by the 70s?
I think so. I think at this point, I'm not sure the name, but the aircrafts in general have gone becoming kind of like very light, dainty to things that need to be able to lift heavy loads, and also move quite fast. And so there was a lot of interest in how do we do this efficiently? How do we design our planes and optimize them so that, you know, if there is an emergency situation, we know the conditions in which we're going to be able to land and the one that's opposite of landing take off
Right.
efficiently, safely. So I think it really is just NASA became such a really big beast with so many different divisions and groups and centers that her work in her division just was focused on something pretty distinct from, you know, what was happening with the rockets and these sorts of things in the space race. And so I think that that's really just the main thing was the NACA, the National Aeronautics of National Advisory. Oh gosh. Anyways, NACA. I always do this. I swap the advisory and the aeronautics, but it was really small. You know, it started with just a handful of employees, and it was very interconnected, and then it just kind of continued to grow and grow and grow and compartmentalize. And so I think that her work was just in a different part of the center. And similarly, we should have a talk later by about Dorothy Hoover, and she worked at this Goddard Space Flight Center and did a lot of theoretical aeronautics work, and that also didn't show up too much in the movie or in the story because it was distinct from what Katherine Johnson and them were doing.
Right, right. Well, I certainly would love to know, like, if what Smith worked on was very instrumental in the space shuttle program. You know, space shuttle was really the first one by the late 1970s, early 1980s, would start off as a rocket, but then eventually land as an aircraft. So, you know, like definitely the information there about how the tires behave in soil would certainly be of interest to NASA by then. So maybe let's thank Dr. Edmonds one more time before we move on to our next talk. So yeah, Anthony, I really did enjoy this talk. So thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm going to drop in the chat before I go off screen just the report that I referenced so that if anyone's interested in unpacking it, it's very readable, and I only shared a very small bit of it. And so it's really interesting, everything that they were doing and how they set it up.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. Let's see, we're going to try to move on to our next speaker, Michelle Farabee. We might need a couple minutes here for our switch over with the technology.
Hi, Idre, how you doing? Eric with Tech Assistance here. If I can be of any assistance, let me know in terms of screen share, audio, video, etc.
All right, great. Well, let's keep you there. Let's see, Michelle. If you are there in the room, please click on the button at the top of your screen that says something like share audio video, and then I can bring you on as one of the moderators. I know she's there.
Yeah, she should enter the queue below the main stage there once she's requested.
Mm-hmm. Tasha, I see your comment here. Eric, one of our speakers said she cannot hear me. I wonder, does she need to click something in her?
My first recommendation would be refresh the browser. We've had this scenario a couple times today when refreshing actually helped out. So, because everyone else is able to hear you, so it's got to be something on her browser end. Okay, Michelle is with us.
Thank you.
Okay, now can you hear me?
Perfect.
Good
I hear
afternoon,
you
everyone.
just fine.
Okay, so let me see if I can figure out how to share my screen.
Okay.
Just the little square box with an X through it should allow you to share screen.
Oh, okay.
Yep. There we go.
Boy. Okay, so now Y'all, I have,
Now,
this
now,
is,
Eric, this is the same problem that I was having. How do you
So it's really
do
meant
this?
so like if you had a PowerPoint, you would make that full screen now, and that's all you would see on the screen. But my recommendation during screen share would be to share an actual application. So you would open a PowerPoint on your desktop and then go to the Windows section of the screen share, and it'll share that window instead of your entire screen.
okay, so I think I'm sharing now. So how do I unshare?
So
Because I,
click on the little TV square box on the bottom again and say stop share.
okay, and what I'll do also is
Yes.
I'm going to get rid of, I had dual screens, so I'm going to get rid of the dual screens.
Okay.
Okay. And Michelle, if
And
there are any questions, I can just read them out to you. You don't need to worry about trying to read the chat window.
okay, so I'm going to try to share one more time.
Yeah, just share, but open the application you're going to be showing on your desktop first. There we are. That looks better.
Okay. So now I think am I full screen?
Not quite. We still see part of your desktop. Perfect.
How's that?
Yep, perfect, Michelle. Thank you.
That is perfect.
Okay.
All
Well,
right. Well, yeah, let's go ahead and get started. So it is a great pleasure to introduce our second speaker for today, Michelle Farabee, who is at the NASA Langley Research Center. We just heard about the Langley Research Center, who gives a talk on women in NASA aerospace. Michelle?
well, thank you. And again, it's just my honor and pleasure to be with all of you today. I did sneak in women in NASA aerospace, although my abstract was, as you read, women in aeronautics. I wanted to just expand just a little bit. It's all related. And again, I want to thank Dr. Edmonds because it's a wonderful segue that you provided. And I loved hearing about Eunice Smith. I am curious as to whether or not, and Dr. Darden might be able to help us with this, whether or not, depending on what the time that she was there, if Eunice Smith was still considered a computer. But I definitely am going to follow up on that. As Edre mentioned, I'll talk a little bit about my career if we have time toward the end, but I am at the NASA Langley Research Center. I've been there almost 38 years. It comes September, be 38 years. I'm a mathematician by training, and I have had the pleasure of actually starting at NASA when Katherine Johnson, Mary Jackson, and of course, Dr. Christine Darden was still there. And I am also an Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority member. Christine Darden is actually in the Hampton chapter with myself. There's a Hampton, Virginia chapter and a Newport News chapter. And I have been a member of the NTA, the National Technical Association, as well. And I am standing on the shoulders of these great women and am just blessed that their stories have come out over the years. So what I'm going to do is a little bit different. I want to provide you with a brief overview of NASA's as a whole, followed by a little bit more details about NASA Langley Research Center. And then I'm going to highlight some women who made contributions to aerospace, and maybe a little bit more about my highlights. And then throughout, I'll be talking about the skills that are needed to move our NASA mission forward, which is where many of you come in, hopefully, to help us do that. So first, NASA's vision is we reach new heights and reveal the unknown for the benefit of humankind. And NASA's collective workforce with the NASA headquarters in Washington, D.C., and the 10 NASA centers that you see in this picture comprise about almost 35,000 employees. About half are civil servant government employees, and the other half are contract employees. About 30% are women, and we are proud of the many contributions that women have made and the success of our missions throughout history. And as I mentioned before, we really are standing on the shoulders of these women pioneers. Myself and some of my other colleagues are considered to be modern figures because we came after the hidden figures, and they definitely influenced and contributed our ability to raise through the highest ranks of NASA and the government. NASA Langley is just turned 104 years old on July 17th. We are the original NASA center that you heard about during Hidden Figures. And all the other NASA centers came out of us. NASA Langley, NASA's Ames and Armstrong, which are on the West Coast, and Glenn Research Center in Cleveland, Ohio, are primarily what we call aeronautics centers, and they were the kind of the we focus on primarily on aircraft, airplane, aeronautics research. Johnson and Kennedy Space Center are more space flight. You hear a lot of atmospheric sciences come out of Goddard, and I can go on, but I think you get the idea. You know, our primary mission areas are space technology, earth science, and aeronautics. So next slide. So here at Langley, we actually contribute to all of the agency's primary mission and vision areas. We have a special focus on space technology, earth science, and aeronautics. And as we expand knowledge and test new ideas, we look for ways to refine and improve our tools, our business practices, our workforce, and our culture. In science, we're deepening humankind's understanding of the Earth's atmosphere and how our planet absorbs and reflects sunlight. And all of these are factors in weather and changing climate. Of course, it doesn't get more exciting right now than space exploration. We have the Moon to Mars focus, and we're creating concepts and technologies that astronauts will use to explore our solar system. We're going into deep space, and soon we're going to do that. But in the meantime, the Artemis program, we're going to land the first female and the first person of color on the moon, 2025. In the world of aeronautics, we help expand the possibilities of air transportation through new ideas for new vehicles, and the future transportation through what we're doing to improve our airspace. And we're in an exciting time right now. And I'm going to tell you a little bit more about where Dr. Christine Darden comes into that. We talk about transformation because we're looking at the future of our work and our workforce. And, you know, try not to roll your eyes, but we're looking for ways to improve and expand our capabilities so we can continue to innovate for another 100 years. And we're laying the groundwork for that right now. And a lot of the transformation is moving forward just because of COVID, because now people can work from anywhere. And we are really embracing that at NASA, because that expands the partnership opportunities we have with universities that don't live near NASA Center, that are not residing near NASA Center, and it allows people to work from all over the country and still be able to take care of elderly families, have lower costs of living. So we really are looking to do that, and that's something that I want to emphasize, because I want you all to understand and embrace that we need you to help move our mission forward. And STEM engagement is definitely a priority, because we've got to have a diverse pipeline, and in order to do that, we have to embrace and tell our story to our younger generation, and create opportunities for our college students to be able to work at NASA while you're completing your degrees. I mentioned previously that we are exploring, trying to understand our Earth and beyond, and we create technologies that monitor the Earth's atmosphere. We have measurements to take these measurements that we need to understand and our atmosphere, and we really do contribute to predicting air quality, weather, climate, and energy, and all factors that enable our life on Earth. With regard to space exploration, many of you know about the success of our Mars rover Perseverance program and our Mars helicopter Ingenuity. These successes are possible in part because of Langley's expertise in fields such as entry, descent, and landing. And this photo is an illustration of the navigation Doppler lidar that can help ensure safe and precise landings on the moon. Now, next, we like to say that NASA's with you when you fly, because technology developments that are incorporated have been incorporated in virtually all types of aircraft. So every airplane that's flying has either flown in a wind tunnel or is the benefit of a piece of technology or new material that we've developed at NASA, and specifically many times at NASA Langley Research Center. And what we're trying to do is optimize air travel by reducing air traffic congestion and environmental impacts while increasing aircraft safety. And we want to work to mobilize our nation by clearing the way for new kinds of vehicles, such as autonomous aircraft, to do all kinds of new things. And we trailblaze by working on experimental supersonic aircraft and cutting-edge propulsion systems and concepts. And Dr. Darden, who is, I believe, is with us today, and of course she'll be speaking on Friday. She was a pioneer in the area of supersonic aircraft. And this aircraft that is shown here is called the Low Boom Flight Demonstrator Aircraft. It's also called the X-59 or the Quest aircraft for quiet supersonic transport. The technologies that Dr. Darden developed have led to this plane is in right now Lockheed Martin on the West Coast being built, and this plane will test Dr. Darden's technologies. And to frame it, this supersonic plane will fly not with a supersonic boom like the Concorde did, but it'll fly with a thump. So you won't have glasses breaking when it flies over land. You won't have you won't have the air environmental issues. You won't have disruption to our wildlife as that plane flies overhead. And to give you more context, imagine if you can fly from the East Coast to the West Coast in 2 hours instead of 5 hours, because we can fly that plane fast and quiet. And if once that plane, the testing is complete, then NASA will go back to the Federal Aviation Administration, the FAA, and ask them to allow us to fly supersonically over land again, because right now the regulations don't allow us to do so. So we can thank our hidden figure, who is no longer hidden, Dr. Darden, for her trailblazing work in this area. So now what I want to do briefly, and please, I want to be respectful of your time. I want to talk a little bit about some pioneers at NASA, and then from there move on to talk about some of our modern figures that are still at NASA. And again, emphasize that we need you all to stand on our shoulders and come to work with and for NASA as well. So Pearl Young, she was the first professional woman at the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics, NACA, some people refer to as NACA. She was hired in 1922 as a physicist and assigned to the Instrument Research Division, which designed, constructed, calibrated, and repaired all instrumentation that carried on NASA Langley aircraft. By 1929, Ms. Young noticed that young engineers had poor technical writing skills and that a system was required to establish procedures to improve the quality of publications. So she was appointed as Langley's first chief technical editor, and she also wrote on subjects involving astrophysics. Right now, today, to this day, the system that Pearl Young put into place is still in place almost 100 years later. Kitty Joyner, she was graduated from the University of Virginia's Electrical Engineering program in 1939. And that's after she won a lawsuit allowing her to attend the all-male engineering classes. She was hired as a junior civil engineering aide in 1939, and then she ended up managing wind tunnels at NASA. And I want you to hold that thought when I start talking about Mary Jackson. Now, Virginia Tucker, she was hired in 1935 as a computer, and she had a degree in math. And she started out as a teacher in North Carolina, and then she became a computer, and she was one of the first 5 women to join NASA. And by the 1940s, of course, that number grew to over 400. And computers were paraprofessional. So even if Miss Eunice Smith was a mathematician, she was not paid at the higher level of pay that a male engineer with the same credentials would have been paid. And now I go to our hidden figures, Miss Johnson, Miss Vaughn, Mary Jackson. And again, in 1943, that's when the African-American women with college degrees came about, and they were led by Virginia Tucker, the woman I showed earlier. And since it's already been discussed about how they worked in the segregated areas and they did the same work as their white counterparts, I'm going to move through that since it's already been so well discussed. And Dorothy Vaughan, of course, she came on board and she was ended up being an expert in Fortran programming. And what's so wonderful about Dorothy is she saw the writing on the tea leaves, right? She saw these big computers getting delivered, and she went back and told her folks, you got to retool. These real physical computers are going to take over what we do, so you need to retool. And that's a lesson for all of us, right? Don't get comfortable. Always, continual learning, and be aware of your surroundings, because things change and we have to be able to transform with them. And so that's very important. Now I want to spend a little more time on Mary Jackson, because it kind of parallels with the Kitty story that I told you earlier, Miss Kitty. She in 1951, Mary Jackson came to the Lang Memorial Aeronautical Labs segregated West Area Computing section, and Dorothy Vaughan was her supervisor. Mary is from Hampton, Virginia, and she graduated from Hampton Institute with a dual degree in math and physical sciences. And she was a teacher in Maryland before she got the job offer to work at NASA. And she ended up working in a 4x4 foot supersonic pressure tunnel, a 60,000 horsepower wind tunnel capable of blasting models with winds approaching twice the speed of sound, which is about 700 plus miles per hour. And her supervisor engineer offered her hands-on experience conducting experiments within the facility, and eventually suggested that she enter a training program that would allow her to earn a promotion from mathematician to engineer. So in order to do that, she had to take graduate level math and physics in after-work courses managed by the University of Virginia. Remember that name? But because they were held at the then segregated Hampton High School, and my brother, by the way, was one of the first blacks to integrate that high school back in the late 1960s, she would need special permission from the city of Hampton to join her white peers. So what did she do? She had a lawsuit and she won. And she was the first Black female engineer at NASA Langley. But what she realized was there was still a glass ceiling. Remember, I talked about mathematicians being paraprofessionals and not truly professionals. So she decided to change her career, leave engineering, take a demotion, and fill an open position to the Langley Federal Women's Program. And that's where she was able to put in place processes and procedures that would allow women to be paid and to reach the same levels of the male counterparts that had the same experience. And just as a piece of trivia, yesterday was Black Women's Pay Equality Day. So it's very appropriate to honor Mary Jackson, because I'm definitely have been a recipient of the work that the groundwork that she laid. We all know about Catherine. I'm not going to belabor that. But I always like to remember that John Glenn did not want to fly until Katherine Johnson ran the numbers on the computer by hand. And he said, if she says they're good, then I'm ready to go. So, and he was ready to go. His flight was a success. And that was really a turning point for us in the space race. This is just as I mentioned, there were over 400 female employees by 1944 who were computers and computer assistants. And this is just a depiction of some of the women computers. So now our lady, Dr. Christine Darden. Dr. Christine Darden, she was a human computer. She went on to become a data analyst, and ultimately she became an aerospace engineer. And I talked to you, she's holding one of her models regarding her low boom research that she performed, her sonic boom research. And she's known internationally from the research that she did. And I had the pleasure of working in aeronautics area, and have been witness to the low boom flight demonstration program that she started, and Dr. Darden is still in touch with her colleagues, and some of her colleagues are now leading that program. And more importantly, Dr. Darden was the first African American female to reach the highest civilian rank of senior executive service at NASA Langley. And thus far, we've had 4 total. Dr. Darden was the first. Mr. Clayton Turner, who is Black male center director at Langley right now, was the second. My husband was the third. And another young man who's Jonathan Ransom has a PhD in material science, and he is a senior executive running an organization right now. And I am actually in a senior executive service program, and right now I'm director of an organization that Dr. Darden led before she retired. So I really am following her footsteps and standing on her shoulders. The reason that I expanded this talk to aerospace is because we're very proud that Vanessa Weiss is the director of Johnson Space Center. And she was deputy director from 2018 till about 2 months ago. And she is the first Black center director in the agency, Black female center director in the agency. And she is an engineer, and she's been deputy director. She's been deputy director of exploration, integration, and science. And she was flight manager for some of the space shuttle programs at Johnson, and she was executive officer to the NASA administrator in Washington, D.C. And prior to that, in 1989, before joining NASA in 1989, she worked for the FDA in Washington, D.C. Our Hispanic sisters, Dr. Marla Perez Davis, she is the director at NASA Glenn Research Center, another aeronautics center. And just as of note, 1980 or so was the first time at NASA Langley that we started having Hispanic engineers and scientists join NASA. So, we definitely have a ways to go there. Julie Williams Bird, she is a Hampton University graduate physicist by training, and she's an electro-optics engineer at NASA Langley Research Center, another modern figure. And she's Langley's chief technologist, and she advises our center director and senior staff on technology matters and provides technical leadership for planning, management, and evaluation of comprehensive center-wide technology development activities with an emphasis on early stage technologies. So a lot of the work that we do in the low TRL work that we do, technology readiness work that we do in preparation for future missions and future work come out of her office, and she leads, performs technology development related studies and performs data analysis for the NASA agency chief technologist at NASA headquarters. And Julie does sit on the senior staff leadership staff as part of senior leadership at NASA Langley. Debbie Martinez.
Michelle?
Yes.
Yeah, Michelle, sorry to interrupt. We can maybe wrap up in another minute or so.
Oh, okay. I am toward the end. So Debbie Martinez is another senior engineer at NASA Langley. Dr. Mia Siochi, materials engineer. I've talked a little bit about myself. And I want to end with this slide that our people are the most important. And I want to encourage all of you, if you're still students or recently graduated, look for our pathways, internship opportunities. If you've graduated and have graduated within 2 years, either doctorate, undergraduate, or master's degree, of course, not in that order. And also for high school students, if you Google NASA internships, we have paid internships for high school students, and you work side by side with researchers and engineers and contribute to our mission. We don't have you doing menial tasks. We actually have you contributing to our mission. So I'm going to leave it there. And again, I want to emphasize that we need you at NASA, and we need others to stand on the shoulders of the great women who paved the way for us. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Let's please give her a round of applause. That was really a great overview of what's happening these days at Langley. So really did appreciate it. We have time maybe for one question. If anyone here would like to put one in the chat window. So I'll wait here for a moment.
And Dr. Edmonds, I would love to have your talk. We're having our third induction of our NASA Hall of Honor. And we always want diverse inductees. And the fact that we don't know a lot about Eunice Smith, I would love to have your talk and do a little bit more work on investigating some of the works that she's done. So I appreciate that.
Oh, certainly. Yes, I'll send you a direct message to get your email information.
Yeah, I can put it in.
Yeah, there is a request along these lines. Margaret Simonson would like to know, is it possible to get a copy of the slides? I'm guessing that maybe some of our speakers here might be willing to make the slides available. I think you can probably email people directly. I think that there's a way to do that here in the Hopin system. But certainly if anyone would like a copy of the slides, yeah, send an email directly. Anthony just put her email there. You can also email myself or Dr. Darden.
Yes.
We'll be happy to reply to that. So yeah, well, if we can please give Michelle Farabee another round of applause. That really was a great overview. I really did like that talk.
Thank you
very much. And let's see, while we transition to our next talk, so I think Tasha is pretty much ready to go. I'm going to bring her here on stage. I'm going to try to get Dr. Darden to maybe come on for a second. I've actually been on the phone with her trying to deal with some technical issues. So Christine, if there's a way you can click on the join audio and video, let's see if we can actually do this while Tasha comes to the stage. And I'm hoping if you just click on that, then I'll see you in the moderation panel that I can add you to the chat here. Okay. All right, if Christine's having trouble, I'll call her on the phone and then we could try this again in another 20 minutes or so. Tasha, can you hear me just fine? Are you maybe ready to go?
Yes, I can hear you perfectly. So thank you to Eric for arranging for me to hear you. I want to say thank you to my colleagues, my fellow panelists. I really enjoyed your talk. So very excited.
Yeah, definitely.
So how do I share? Let's see.
Yeah, you should see like a monitor with the red line through it at the bottom of the window here with all the presenters.
Okay, got it.
Yep. And if you click on that, you probably need to go to the window where your slides are and then click full screen for that window.
Okay.
So you may not be able to see us, but we'll be able to see you.
Yeah, I think I'm able. Okay, let's check it out now and see. And can you all see? Let's see. I didn't select it. So which window are you all seeing? Are you seeing anything?
We're not seeing anything. Nothing right now.
All right. Interesting. So I'm clicking on, okay, come to see your screen. Yes. Select window. Okay, I'm seeing it. PowerPoint slide. Let's see. Okay, I think we're ready.
Okay. All right.
Let
Whenever
me
you're
know
ready
if
for
you
your
all
to share
can
your
see.
screen. No, we still can't see anything.
Okay,
Still
let's
nothing.
try it again.
Tasha, this is Eric from AV here. Just the bottom portion of the screen, you'll see a little TV with a slash through it. That's how you initiate sharing screen.
Mm-hmm.
And then if it's a
And I
PowerPoint,
did press that.
okay. And then the best means of doing so is sharing an actual
And
window that's
I
already
was
opened.
thinking about it. Okay. I apologize for the delay. It said it asked me to grant access, and I did, and I thought we were good to go. Should I try again?
Yeah.
Let's see.
So it appears she got kicked off.
Oh no. Okay, we'll just give it a moment here.
This is a minute or two networking break.
Right. Now, maybe while we're waiting, Ranthony, since I have you on screen, you mentioned earlier that you taught a class on Hidden Figures last year. I'm wondering, are you going to teach that class again this coming year? Maybe can you like share a little bit about it while we're waiting for Tasha to come back?
Yeah, so this is a service learning course. And so the reason that's important is that, like, we read the Hidden Figures story, we kind of unpack the math that's happening in the text, we talk about mathematical tools that they would have used back then. So in the presentation, I talked about how they use specific devices to get these measurements. The human computers would have used something called a slide rule. And I don't have one on me, I think it's in the car, but we teach our students how to use this. But the service learning component is related to the fact that we pair our students with sort of local hidden figures. So we call them Hidden Figures of Columbus. So these are going to be those who are underrepresented in STEM disciplines. And so we use that really broadly, mathematically. So we have data scientists, someone who works a lot with women in analytics. We have the Franklin County coroner, just kind of a wide variety of a wide variety of people who are interacting with our students, talking to them about their professional journeys and how they gain access to different mathematical communities, which is how we sort of center our discussions on the book. What kind of mathematical communities do these women have access to, and how did this help them professionally? And so this is, we taught it 2 times now. It'll be offered again in the spring. And it's been interesting transitioning to a virtual format with the course, but I think it worked out okay. And I think we learned a lot from the last time around in case we have to do that again.
Okay, and hopefully you see the comment here that Jamil Carter has. When you say service learning, is this a course for students preparing to be teachers?
So when we say service learning, in the sense that we have a community partner who we work with for the class, and we develop activities called service learning activities that are aligned with the mission of our community partner and also our course objectives. So it's kind of like having an outreach component baked into a course. And so this is what I mean by service learning. And then it's open to any student. It's a general elective. But we've had a pre-service teacher last semester. So I think that, so thank you for your question. I think that Tasha Ennis is back. So I'm really excited to see her presentation now.
Right. Okay. Yeah, great. So Tasha, we can see your screen. We just cannot see you. Yeah, Anthony, thanks very much for letting us know about that. Certainly a fascinating idea. I don't think I know any other universities or colleges in the country that actually have a course on Hidden Figures. So certainly a really fascinating idea.
Yeah, thanks for giving me the platform to share a bit about it.
Idre, I saw Tasha appeared momentarily. Here she is again. Hopefully this sticks.
Okay.
All right. Hi, Tasha.
So, Tasha, can you see us?
Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
We can hear you. Yeah, and your screen is beautiful. So, if you feel you're ready, I can introduce you and we can get started. Yeah, Tasha, we can see you and hear you. Can you hear us? Oh, I'm guessing she cannot hear us then.
Okay, great. Thank you, Eric, for saying that you can. Okay, awesome. So good afternoon, and I will skip many slides since we had technical difficulties. I just have to say thank you to the organizers, Dr. Goins and Dr. Darden. It's an incredible honor to be part of this celebration of Dr. Christine Darden. And so, you know, when I was first invited to present, I was wondering if, you know, my work was really aligned with the theme, because most of the hidden figures and the African American women pioneers are from NASA and space. But then I remembered in Washington, D.C., there's a Smithsonian Museum, the National Air and Space Museum. So I'm going to focus on the air piece. So good afternoon. My name is Tasha Ennis, and I'm at Spelman College. I'm an applied mathematician and associate provost for research. So, okay. So what I wanted to do was give you kind of an overview of the things I'm planning to cover in this talk. I want to talk about a couple of pioneers in aviation to coincide with and be aligned with some of my fellow panelists, give a little bit of background on what is known as aviation operations research, and then talk about the value of applied mathematics. And so I'm going to talk about going from operations research to data mining, and then from data mining to data science and advanced analytics. So the first pioneer is known to be the first African-American woman to receive a pilot's license, though it was not in the United States because of racism and sexism at the time. She actually learned how to fly in France and received her pilot's license in that way. But the first African-American woman to Willa Brown. She and her husband actually opened a training school where they trained many of the Tuskegee Airmen. And a more recent hidden figure who has spent over 40 years in the Federal Aviation Administration, Vanessa Blacknell Jameson, is the first African-American woman to lead the Organization of Black Aerospace Professionals. So from 1921 to present day, we have African-American women making an impact in aviation. So I want to first start off talking about this group that I was part of when I was a graduate student, the National Center of Excellence for Aviation Operations Research. It was established by the FAA in 1996. There were 4 core partners. I was at the University College Park. There was also Virginia Tech, MIT, and Berkeley. And next door since 1996, there have been over 100 master's and doctoral dissertations produced. And I have a picture here of my colleague, Taryn Butler Lewis. She and I were both members of Nextdoor, and we believe we're the only African-American women researchers that were part of this Center of Excellence. So I talk about aviation operations research. So let me just take a step back. And for those of you, many of you probably know what OR is, but just giving kind of a brief definition. So really thinking about mathematical models that you can model, improve, and optimize real world systems. So you may have heard that OR was an area that came about during World War II. So it had military applications. So it actually was used to route and plan the use of tanks during the World War. And so I really wanted to emphasize that this OR was from the very beginning a multidisciplinary field. and popular areas of OR are linear programming, integer programming, queuing theory, and network analysis, which is akin to graph theory. So I just wanted to give a brief definition of OR because I want to talk now about my dissertation. And I'll briefly touch on this and go into more details later. So, of course, my topic was aviation operations research, and the title was Stochastic Models for the Estimation of Airport Arrival Capacity Distributions. And I'll just tell you briefly that at San Francisco International's airport, it's usually socked in, I know that's a very technical term, is when there's fog, you can't see to land. And so you have to rely on gauges. So in that case, when there's bad weather, you have to have a different runway configuration. You have to have increased separation distances between planes, but trying to figure out, well, how can you best estimate how many planes you can land when you have inclement weather? So that's kind of a brief overview of my dissertation topic, and I am going to later talk to you about how I brought all of the areas of applied mathematics to bear on this dissertation work. So the first topic or field that I want to talk about in applied math is data mining. So during the time that I began my research, data mining was emerging as an area, and actually it was also known as a step in the knowledge discovery and databases, or KDD. Actually, there was a seminal work in 1996 from these three authors that are listed here. And data mining simply is trying to look for patterns and relationships in a large amount of data. And so data mining I used because I was trying to figure out, okay, the weather conditions, how does that contribute to the airport arrival rates? And so I have to look at historical data. So I use data mining in that respect. So from OR to data mining. So one of the things that I wanted to do when I was working on my work, because data mining was such a fascinating area, I wanted to figure out not only how to use OR, but also how to use data mining. And what I did area known as predictive data mining, sometimes it's called classification or supervised learning, and it's used in many different ways. So trying to explore the data, identify patterns, as I said before, building models, which is what I wanted to do for my dissertation. And I have listed here just a few examples that uses data mining. So goals of data mining could be prediction or knowledge discovery. So as you can see here, there are multiple disciplines that kind of influence data mining. As you notice, there is data visualization, there is machine learning, algorithms, pattern recognition. And so because of these different areas, I really feel that data mining was kind of the precursor and really led to the foundation and the rise of the field of data science, particularly with the increased computing power and data storage capabilities. So I talked about going from data mining to data science. Now, there are a lot of robust discussions and debates about how do we define data science and where does data science fit? Does it fit in a math department? Does it fit in statistics department? Does it fit in computer science? Does it fit in an area with the domain knowledge, say for social sciences? So I'm not going to attempt to define data science for you like I did for operations research and data mining, but what I do want to do is kind of present to you the work related to data science from other organizations. I actually did a rotation at the National Science Foundation from 2013 to 2017. And during that time, the NSF director, she remarked about how we're moving from an information age to an age of analytics. And she also talked about going from the industrial revolution to the data revolution. And I listed here another quote about how it's going to be so important that we can store, integrate, and extract meaning from data. Along those same lines, I actually participated in some workshops from the South Big Data Hub, which was funded by the National Science Foundation, and they currently have a focus on data science, education, and workforce. Now, the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine really was trying to understand kind of, what should be the curriculum for the data science discipline on the undergraduate level. So they had a series of meetings, and now they have produced a consensus report. And I have put the link to that, just kind of envisioning, what the data science discipline is. And so feel free to, when I share the slides, feel free to look up this consensus report. And then the last thing I'll point out, my colleague and fellow panelist, Dr. Talithia Washington, is actually the director of the Atlanta University Center Consortium Data Science Initiative. And on their webpage, there's a definition that's listed, but again, it's basically trying to gain insight and information from data using analytical and computational mathematical techniques. So that is data science. So now going from data mining to data science, and then also what we talk about is being analytics or advanced analytics. And so the definition here is really the scientific process of transforming data into insights for making better decisions. Now, when I served as the inaugural director of education and industry outreach at Informs, which is the largest professional society for OR and analytics professionals, I encountered that their focus really was on analytics. And the reason being is because you can think of analytics as being this kind of umbrella for all of the data science and OR techniques that you are using in order to do quantitative decision making or data informed decisions. And so one of the members, the Inform members, tried to create this framework to really help kind of distinguish, well, data science from OR, from analytics. And so this is kind of the framework that he developed, and I actually I gravitate towards that. And I use a lot of the data science and OR techniques. I used a lot of them in my work for the dissertation. So, and I apologize that I can't, like Dr. Edmonds, I cannot see. Okay, one second. I cannot see everybody, so I don't know if you have questions. And so I apologize if you do. And I'll have to check real quick to make sure I'm not running. Uh-oh. It's thinking about it. Okay. My computer, of course, would want to act up when I'm giving a presentation.
Yeah, Tasha, if you can hear me, no worries. I can make sure the questions come in.
Let me check to see if I can see faces and make sure that I'm not running over my time. Let's see. Okay. Okay, so now what I want to do is talk to you and about the applied mathematics areas that I use for my dissertation research. Of course, we talked about data mining, and I actually had received data from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, data on fog conditions at San Francisco, coupled with data from the FAA on the arrival rates at airports. So really work closely with the Air Traffic Control System Command Center, the ATC SCC. So I wanted to figure out, okay, when you had certain fog conditions, how does that contribute to the arrival rates? And I used kind of like classification rules. I think it was called classification and regression trees. That's a technique of data mining. Also with applied statistics, one of the things that I realized with San Francisco in particular and the fog conditions is that the fog is worse or takes a longer time to dissipate certain times of the year. And so really needed to understand kind of the time element to creating the models. Of course, operations research, actually in particular, integer programming, where I wanted to figure out, okay, how do I create these seasons? And I'll share a little bit about that shortly. And then mathematical modeling. So in the next slides, I just want to give you a brief glimpse into how I derived the models from my dissertation. And I just would say that I would argue that I indeed utilize both data science and analytics before either of them were officially established in the terms coined. Okay, so research projects, I put here data and text mining. Text mining really is just kind of an extension of data mining in that you're using textual data, but I'm not going to focus on text mining. I really just want to focus on the first project, which was on I developed in my dissertation known as the seasonal clustering algorithm. And essentially what we're trying to do was to maintain the time order of the data. So when we think about fall conditions in a particular season, we don't want to cluster. And notice it says clustering algorithm. Clustering actually is what's known as unsupervised learning. So that's another area of data mining. We talked about classification and prediction. This is clustering and unsupervised learning. But again, clusters, when you put data, you're just trying to put data together that is close. And so there are metrics that you use for clustering. But the clustering algorithm that I developed had a little extra thing in that you had to maintain the time order of the data. So I couldn't put, fall conditions from February in the same season or cluster with fall conditions from November. They had to be contiguous months. And so in order to figure out the seasonal clustering algorithm, it actually was a two-step. We wanted to make sure that the data within a season was as close or as similar as possible, but then the data in between seasons were as dissimilar as possible. And so the first step was the clustering step, which is the set partitioning integer programming that I spoke of. And I won't go into detail since I just kind of described it a little bit before, but essentially you're trying to figure out how to assign, months to seasons related to the fall conditions at San Francisco corresponding to the airport arrival rates. And then there's a validation step, which says, okay, how can we be sure that we have gotten the model that says, yes, the data within a season is close and then between seasons is dissimilar. And so for those of you who do statistics, you may recognize that this is the F statistic. So to summarize, one may argue with me that, kind of the current hot topics, the emerging areas that are coming up in applied mathematics, they didn't come, from scratch, that they have their foundation in more established fields. And so I just wanted to give you my thought on kind of the timeline for the development of these different fields and areas. So first, I would say statistics. then operations research, machine learning, data mining, text mining, data science, analytics, artificial intelligence. But the value of applied math, it's so beautiful that you can bring all of the different techniques to bear on some of these very challenging problems. Right now, we are dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic, and we have data scientists all over the world working, on this problem, trying to understand the data. In my particular case, I just used it to develop a mathematical model, really a stochastic model, because weather changes, to really help the FAA to better estimate how many planes that they can land. And I feel just very fortunate that I was able to conduct my research in many of these beautiful areas of applied math. And I will just say thank you. I am happy that I also was able to expose many of my students in Spelman College to operations research, data mining, and data science. And I will stop here and say thank you so much for your patience with the technical difficulties, and for attending the talk. And so let me try to stop sharing and see if you have any questions.
All right. Well, Tasha, thank you very much. It's a great talk, great overview. I'm going to check if you can hear me. Tasha, can you hear me at all? Maybe Anthony, would you mind maybe just unmuting? I wonder then if you can just make sure Tasha can hear us.
Hi, Tasha,
Okay,
can you
let's
hear
see.
me? I don't
My
think she can hear
computer is
either
still
one of us.
okay, let me see if I have questions in the chat because I can't hear anybody. I don't know if Edris, teacher, are you speaking? Let's see. Let me stop.
Okay, I'm going to try to remind us of this question that Maria Clara Nucci
I feel
asked
as many
about.
talks as I have given, I shouldn't be having these type of technical difficulties. There are some questions. Okay, great. Why can't I hear you though? We're trying to talk to you and I can't hear anybody.
Okay.
Oh gosh,
Yeah.
I'm so sorry I can't
So,
hear. Let's see. Let me, what I will do, oh gosh, I'm going to leave and come back in, but please, okay, can you answer Maria Nucci's question on Kathy O'Neill's book? Let me go see. Point of view on the danger of data science, weapon of math destruction. So there is, and thank you so much for that question. Data science, and with everyone thinking about how to define it and how to implement it, there is a big piece of it known as ethics. And so data science, and there's also a book, and I apologize not remembering the name of the author, but Algorithms of Oppression. So you have to be really, really careful when you are doing data science and implementing algorithms. So there is a danger. I would say you definitely have to do it with caution. And we also have to train our students, to not just take the results at face value, if that makes any sense. Okay, let's see if there are any other questions. Okay, the evils of data science when it's used the wrong way. Yes, it definitely can be used the wrong way. That also goes with like facial recognition, and so forth, because, in data mining, data science, there's something known as you have a training set, that you train the algorithm on and then you implement it. But, your model is only as good as your training set. So if you don't have representative data in your training set, then you can run into some issues when you go to implement it. Okay, let's see. Okay. Interesting. Okay. Well, thank you all. I am going to stop here. I'm sorry I can't hear anybody. I appreciate you all. Thank you so much. And I have to give a shout out to my my mentors and my colleagues that are joining. So thank you again.
Yeah, well, thank you, Dr. Ennis. Let's give her one more round of applause. So yeah, thank you very much. I know you can't hear us, but we definitely do appreciate it. Let's see, we're going to try to move on to our next talk. So I'm going to bring in Shelly Jones, and while we're setting things up, let me try one more time to see if we can't get Dr. Darden here in the room to say hello. Christine, if you can try to click that button at the top of the screen that says share audio video. I'm going to see if we can't get this to work. Yeah, to the audience, thanks very much for bearing with us with all the different technology issues. But you know, I think that the talks here are going really well. We have a wide variety of talks. You know, some history, some technical. So I'm really very happy with the talks we're getting here. All right, Shelly, I'm going to try to give another minute before we start. Yeah, okay. We can see your screen perfectly.
Oh, okay.
It's great.
All right. Should I stop sharing for Dr. Darden? Because I just wanted to make sure I could get it to show.
Mm-hmm. Right, exactly. Well, it doesn't look like she's on. We can maybe just give it a few more seconds.
And I only see my screen. I no longer see the Hopin setup. I mean, that's okay with me, but it's kind of weird because I don't see anything except my
I think it's an unfortunate side effect of the system.
Okay, well, you let me know when you want me to start, and then I will go on my merry way.
Okay. All right. Well, let's go ahead and get started because I don't want us to be too off the schedule, so we can go ahead and get started now.
Okay, so you
can wait. Christine just came in. Let's see if we can get this to work.
Should I stop sharing?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, Dr. Darden, we can see you.
Oh, okay. Yeah, this is Christine Darden, and I've been listening to the great stories you all are telling, and that's great. And the story about the weather and landing, everything, they changed the air traffic control models because they started using space vehicles, and because what they would do would be cut out a parallel runway if the weather was bad and everything, and the airplanes got too close to each other, they could have an accident. And so they cut out, they changed that policy and everything so that they could keep landing. But yeah, I've been caught in that a lot of times. I'm just really glad I was able to hear a lot of the talks and everything you're giving. And I got my master's degree in applied mathematics before I even was hired by NASA. So that was also a big help to me.
Yeah. Well, no, thanks very much.
Was there anything else I was supposed to say?
No.
Okay.
I've learned to never tell my elders what they're supposed to say. So we're just happy to have you here.
Okay. Now he would have to bring that in here, wouldn't it? I guess I am your elder.
Hey, Dr. Darden,
yes.
I know we're pressed for time, but was Eunice Smith a computer, or did she make it up to mathematician?
Was she? I guess she was a computer. Of course, she went to church with me for years. And she and Catherine were very, very good friends. But the people that worked down in that landing area where she worked, they had lots of great things to say about the work that Eunice did.
Thank you. I thought she was a computer also, but wasn't.
Well, when I got there, I'm not quite sure who had the designation of computers. I guess my section just had a room called the computer room, and we all got there to work for the engineers. And the computers started, the black computers you said, in the 40s, and the white computers started coming in 1935. That was to help the men reduce the data that were coming out of all these wind tunnels. They didn't have any mechanized calculators or anything to reduce the data and write reports. To write reports and send to everybody in the United States who was actually involved in aeronautics. That was what it was for. And I don't want to talk too much either. And I need to turn off what I just turned on, huh?
Okay, yeah, maybe we can, just to make sure we don't get stay too far off a schedule. We can chat
I
later.
have a leave written. I have a leave written up here in the upper right corner. I guess if I left.
Okay. Yeah, and we'll probably bring you
click
back
it?
on maybe at the end.
Yeah. Just press that camera.
Okay. Well, yeah. Thank you,
to mute
Christine.
yourself.
Okay, if you would have to request again.
That's right. Yeah, this works. Yeah, then we just want to make sure that everyone has their cameras off while we go to the next session. So, yeah, again, thank you, Dr. Darden, and it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Shelley Jones at Central Connecticut State University, also president of the Benjamin Banneker Association. She will give us a talk on STEM stars, the celebrity of women role models in the aeronautical industry. Shelley.
Okay. Hi, everyone. So I would like to start with a land acknowledgement. I live and work on the ancestral lands of the Quinnipiac, the Tunxis, the Pagussets, and the Paquonics, Native people. I honor their ancestors, and I realize that I am privileged to live on this land. I thank Dr. Goins and Dr. Darden, also the audience for attending our session. And of course, I am honored to serve on a panel with my esteemed co-panelists. So my talk is from the lens of a math educator as I prepare pre-service teachers, K-5 pre-service teachers to teach math. And I love opening their eyes to looking at math differently and broadening their view of what mathematics is. So I'm coming from that lens. It's a little different from what I've been hearing. And although I am talking about the aeronautics and aerospace, Black women in those fields, I also want to start off by just talking about one of the things that I really believe that representation matters. So I use that hashtag all the time. Of course, we know who Suni Lee is. She's the first Hmong American to compete in women's gymnastics at the Olympics. And we know that she has won one of each medal. And then we have Miriam Mirzakhani, and I don't know if I'm saying her name correct. So please accept my apologies. And she's up to date. She's the first woman to win the Fields Medal and a brilliant mathematician. And then we have VP Kamala Harris. We know she's the first African American, the first female, the first Asian American VP of the United States. And then we have Dr. Martha Euphemia Lofton Haynes, who is the first African American woman to earn a doctorate in mathematics, and she earned it in 1943 from Catholic University. And then we have Katie Sowers, and she's the first openly gay and first female coach to coach in an NFL Super Bowl game. And, you know, there's so many women who we can talk about who are first. And Rosa Rios. And Rosa is, she's the first Hispanic female to have a photo of her, a portrait of her hung at Harvard University. And it's because she was the 43rd treasurer of the United States. I love the initiative that she had, and it was an app to put women's faces on the $5, the $10, and the $20 bill. And she also had I guess it's an effort that it was called Teachers Writing History. And she wanted to include stories of historic women in classrooms across the country. And as it turns out, when she went back to her high school, one of her teachers realized that he had never had a woman's face on his wall, like never in history. He was a history teacher, and he put her picture on the wall, and she was the first ever. So I wanted to start off just with first. If she can see it, she can be it. So my talk has to do with the role models that we all are. And I hear that in all of our talks. We're all role models, but some of the things that we can do to put ourselves out there to make sure that those young ladies can see us so that they can see that they can be us. So I'll start with just two pioneers. So Annie Easley, she's a NASA rocket and green energy scientist, and she is featured in Power in Numbers, The Rebel Woman of Mathematics by Talithia Williams. And you probably already know about this wonderful book, but I bring it up because, you know, whenever women, you know, are first and we do things that people don't think that we should do, we're called rebels. And so there we are. We have a rebel in Annie Easley. She was asked about who her role model is. And she says her mother was her greatest role model. And at that time, I don't remember the date. And she says, and she still is. And the reason I bring that up is I've done a little research on role models. And really what I was doing was research on students' mathematics identity. And what we find is that when we present people to students and they've done all these great things, they're brilliant mathematicians, what happens is students don't think that they can do that. Oh, I can't do that. And in fact, when I have middle schoolers come and I talk about my book, Women Who Count, where I highlight African-American women mathematicians, you know, most of the young girls, they're not as interested in the math. They want to know, well, how did you persevere? And, you know, they want to know things like that. But, you know, they mostly want to know about the women. They want to know, well, what are Chelsea's, what are her dogs' names? You know, they want to know, well, do you have children? Did she have children? You know, they might want to know things like, did she pledge a sorority? Things like that. And so I start off by saying that our parents, our neighbors are our role models. I mean, in fact, they were the role models for people like Katherine Johnson. You know, in fact, Margot Shetterly, when she wrote the book, Hidden Figures, she actually didn't think anything of what these women were doing, Katherine Johnson and Mary Jackson, because they were just Miss Johnson from church or Miss Jackson from the Girl Scouts. She thought of them like her neighbors because that's what they were. But what we need to do is we need to still highlight what we do, because yes, it's what we do every day. It's our career, it's our job, but we need to let others know. We need to let the students, the kids in our neighborhoods know. We need to let these organizations for kids know these are the things that we do, so that yes, we're just Dr. Jones down the street, but these are things that we do. It was her husband, Margot's husband, that actually said to her, babe, you know, this is pretty big stuff, because she knew, she had heard the stories about the Hidden Figures from her dad, but she just thought, okay, this is what they do. And her husband had to tell her, no, this is more than just what they do. And so that's how Hidden Figures was sort of born. And so I'm not going to go through what's on the screen because you can read that yourself. But I do want to say that she had a Annie Easley. She had a 34-year career at first NACA, and I'm not going to try to remember which name is which, and then NASA. And she worked in Cleveland, Ohio, which I didn't know until I read the book. Of course, she, like many others, went to segregated schools. They experienced racism and sexism. Like many of the other women that we talk about, they volunteered or they changed their jobs. Like Mary Jackson, she went from being an engineer And instead of going on to the highest level that she can go to, Mary Jackson, she went into equal opportunity because she wanted to, broaden the field. And that's exactly what Annie Easley did as well. And so, we have to thank these women. Like, we stand on their shoulders, but it's because they thought more about others than they did themselves. Jeanette Sissom, a mathematician and a scientist. As a young girl, Jeanette never thought she was smart, but her father knew different. And he said to her when she was just a young girl, "You're going to college." And she didn't know why. He was a sharecropper. And she would go out in the fields with him and they would eat sugar cane. And he told her very early on that you're going to college. But then he got sick. And even after he got sick and the mother became the breadwinner, she still said, "You're going to college." And she didn't know, well, how can I go to college? We don't have any money. And so she did well in school. She was a valedictorian, just like Annie Easley was. And she got a partial scholarship to college, Alabama A&M. And, she also had to work like many of these women did. So she went to college, but she also had to work. She briefly taught high school science, but she knew that was not the thing for her. Even though she got a degree in math, she taught high school at the college. One of the things about these women is early on, even though they didn't go to the best schools, growing up, they read all they could read. And many times they had to do extra. They had to take extra classes so that they can learn what others were learning. And so that's what happened to her as well. So in 1964, she joined NASA's Marshall Space Flight Center, but then she went on later to work at NASA headquarters. And why did she work at NASA headquarters? Because she wanted to join the equal opportunity. And in that particular role, she actually wrote a publication about how to decrease discrimination complaints. They were getting so many complaints. Some of the other women were afraid for her because they said, well, people are mad at you. They don't like the things that you're doing. We like it because, we are the beneficiaries of it. But they were worried about her, but she was not worried. She did what she had to do to broaden the field. And that meant broadening it for women and for minorities. Dr. Jeanette Epps. She said her superpower is to inspire the next generation of girls. Like I said, I'm focused on who are these role models and how can we inspire the next generation? And so, all right, well, doesn't she look great in her space suit? So I'll just say that and go on to the next one. So she is reaching back. And how is she reaching back? She uses Twitter and Facebook and YouTube. And she actually goes out in the field and she goes to high schools and different places where she talks to the young people, and so that she can make a connection to him. And as you can see here, the funny thing is we talk about mathematicians and computers. She got her bachelor's in physics, and she did other professions before she came to NASA. She worked at Ford and she worked for the CIA, but she did come on to, she came to NASA and she was in the 2000 astronaut class. And really what's been going on with her is she's been doing a lot of training, spacewalk and robotics, NASA Extreme Environment Mission Operation, geologic studies in Hawaii, and language immersion in Moscow. And one of the things she talks about, and she also tells younger people about, is she is still in the classroom. Yes, she's an astronaut, but she's still doing training so that when she is able to go to the International Space Station and stay for weeks at a time, that she will know what she has to do there. She has to learn it before she goes there. And that's one of the things that she talks to students about, is how you do have to always learn. You're always learning. It's lifelong. Even once you're in your career, you're learning. Again, I talk about the celebrity. You know, we want to make sure that the world knows about what we're doing in STEM, right? They hear a lot about STEM. They know what it means: science, technology, engineering, and math. And for many people, they think that's out of this world. You know, oh, you have to have a math brain. Oh, I can't believe you're so smart. No, we need them to know that we are just like them and they are just like us, and that they can do the work. How do they do it? Michelle talked about interning, and I'll talk about Shania in a bit, how interning will help, how going to different robotics camps, even having robotics in high schools. There's so many different ways. We have NSBE Junior, Black engineers. So we have that at my university, and I'm sure many universities has the NSBE Junior. But basically, we need to have students feel that spark. You know, in the summer, we run, my university, I'm sure many universities run camps for middle schoolers. And I wanted to do a math camp. And so they said, oh, well, we never had a math camp. We have robotics, we have this, and we have that. Well, what will you do? Like, kids don't want to come and just, you know, do math problems. So no, I said, no, I'm going to connect math to lots of things: math to music, math to art. And so they came, and they couldn't believe for 2 weeks that they did math. But we did math in fun ways. We made connections. You know, I talked about people like Dr. Talia Mayo and what she does with hurricane surges. You know, once kids learn about what math can do for them and what science can do for them, whether it be space exploration, whether it be flying, whatever it is, it could be in any field, any STEM field, they begin to understand, wait a minute, I can do that. And that's what I mean by celebrity, is we really have to open up the world of STEM to the world. Stephanie Wilson, NASA astronaut. And Stephanie Wilson, one of the things I learned about her, now, first of all, I had to learn about these women. You know, I didn't already know what they do. So, you know, you can see what type of education they have, the types of jobs they have at NASA. But what caught my eye about her was her TEDx talk. Let's face it, today we're doing things, we're watching TEDx, we're looking at TikTok. Did I write that somewhere? I didn't write it, but I know there's a science teacher. Actually, one of my students had to tell me this. There's a science teacher that I think she had like 1 million followers, because of the pandemic, she started doing TikTok videos. And apparently they have to be really short, maybe 50 or 60 seconds, maybe under a minute. But the point is that because she's on TikTok, she had to go to her students. I believe she is a high school science teacher, but whatever she is, she's a science teacher, and she went to her students, and those are the things we have to do. So anyway, Stephanie has a TED Talk. She has 12,000 views, and in the 12,000 views, you have people who have their thumbs up and people who have their thumbs down. I can't understand how people have their thumbs down, but then you have people who say things like, and the Kardashians are still the rage. Learn about Stephanie Wilson instead. You know, when we ask students about mathematicians, there was a middle school teacher, and she asked her students to name a mathematician. She really wanted 5. Name mathematicians. And the students could barely name any mathematicians. And when they could name the mathematicians, none of them were women, right? And very few were mathematicians of color. But they could name athletes, and they can name, you know, somebody like the Kardashians, let's face it. And not only would they know the names, but they would know things about the celebrities, like their kids' names. So all I'm saying is, somewhere we have to get in there. I think we're making some inroads, but we have to keep on working. I work with again, teachers who are going to teach elementary K-5, but I also work with teachers who are already, they're in-service teachers, so they're already teaching middle and high school. And we talk about these things and the kinds of things that they have to do. They are much better adept at using, you know, not Facebook, but just Zoom and all these things. A lot of them use Google Classroom for their students. But the teachers that are K-12 teachers these days, they're much more adept at using a lot of these technologies than I am. And I have a degree in computer science, but you know, they're much more adept than I am because they use it for their students. And then one person said, my astronaut crush. I'm sorry, but that's what we want. We want people to be crushing on these astronauts and on these different women who have professions in the aeronautical field and in the aerospace field. We want people to have these crushes. Because why? Because when you crush on somebody, my mother crushes on Ziggy Marley. What? So she looks up Ziggy Marley and she finds all his music, or Andrea Bocelli. Anyway, about Stephanie, she says, the best 8.5 minute, that should say minute ride I've ever had. And that was going into space. Yeah, you got to have a little humor, right? You got to have a little humor. She's been on 3 missions and she's spent 42 days in space. Something that I wanted to mention about Jeanette Epps is once she gets to the International Space Station, that was one thing that I could not figure out. But I think they were supposed to do this, but they haven't done it yet. And although there have been other African Americans that have gone to the International Space Station, I don't think any of them stayed there and lived on lived there for weeks at a time. And I think she was going to be the first. So once I get off of this, we can talk about that, and maybe somebody knows the answer to that. Shania Sanders, computer programmer. The reason why I wanted to show Shania is because she started as an intern at NASA and she got a job in the same place where she did her internship. I'm not saying that that always happens, but hey, you know, and so they asked her things about what inspired you to go into the STEM field. And it was her whole high school robotics team. That's why I say start young, even before high school. And then also collaborative projects with local universities. I'm at a university. Yes, we go into schools. We have different projects that we do. These types of projects are sparking these students' interest in STEM. What is an important lesson that you learn? She said, read the directions and then read them again. Students need to hear that. They need to hear that. Don't be afraid to ask questions. And then what's your advice to the next generation is don't quit. There are no limits in STEM, she says. But when something doesn't work, consider a different path. She said that she had done some project and it just would not work. And she wanted to get it to work before her internship was over. And come to find out, she tried a different path and then it worked. She kept trying and trying that same path, but she said, well, wait a minute, let me step back and think about it differently. And that's what we have to teach students is that it doesn't work. It doesn't always work fast. Kathy Seeley wrote a book called Faster Isn't Smarter, because many students think mathematicians are fast. And I always say, no, it takes all day sometimes to do a problem, or all week or months or even years to solve problems. And so those are the kinds of things that we have to help students to see, is that mathematicians, scientists, it's not a fast process. It's a process of making mistakes and stepping back and thinking about it again. And if we can help students to understand that making mistakes is part of the process, part of the learning, that's when the brain learns the most, is when you make a mistake. If we can help kids to see that, then we can help them to see that STEM might be for them as well. I don't know how much time I have left.
Yeah, Shelly, this is it, Ray. Maybe you can wrap it up in another minute or so.
Okay. So, and I'm just about done. I really just wanted to show you some of the resources that I've been using, that I sort of, been learning through these resources, Mathematicians of the African Diaspora, and then NAM, the National Association of Mathematicians, the Benjamin Banneker Association. Right now, Crystal Morton is the president. I'm the president-elect because we changed from spring to fall. So I have to wait until the fall to become president. And then EDGE, many of you know about EDGE. Many of you might not know about Black Girl Mathgic because it's for students in grades 3 to 8. And it's a subscription box, and every month they get a different theme, and I just love it. And Mathematically Gifted in Black is another one. And I wanted to talk a little bit more about that, and I'm going to skip this. These are questions that I would ask a scientist or an astronaut. Where do you see your place in the history of African American women who have worked in the aeronautics industry? And that can go for anything. So this is something that I would like my students to do. And this is my book, Women Who Count. I talked about that just very briefly. It's also geared for students in grades 3 to 8. And basically I chronicle 29 African American women, mathematicians. And there, you can tweet me at Shelly M. Jones 1, or you can email me if you want the slides. And I gave credit to Slides Go. And I'm going to stop sharing.
Okay.
And
Yeah,
I
well,
know
Professor
that,
Jones.
okay. So I went pretty fast and I couldn't really see things. So did people have questions or?
Yeah, well, first, I do want to give you a round of applause. So that was really great. Yeah, those are certainly rock stars. Yeah, you show pictures of people that I know have inspired me, people that astronauts I've seen that I think are great. There's just one comment based on something that you mentioned. Michelle Farabee says that Victor Glover is the first Black astronaut to actually live on the International Space Station.
Okay, so she was.
I believe that he went up as part of the SpaceX rocket.
Okay.
Yeah, he's actually from here in Southern California, so I know we're actually really proud of him.
So she must be the first African American woman who would have lived on the space station. Okay, thank you, Michelle.
Right. Yeah, that sounds right. Yeah, certainly. I'm looking for at least one question. I don't think that we have really a lot of time, but maybe I'll try to ask a question very quickly. I was really fascinated with this idea you were saying about make math more accessible. Think about Twitter, think about TikTok, think about YouTube channels. One name that comes to mind for me is Ty Dene Bradley. You know, she actually works in category theory, but nowadays she's working, I believe, for Google Alphabet, something like this. But she has a YouTube channel, I believe it's called Mathema, Math3MA, where she does a remarkable job of just explaining incredibly complex concepts. The most recent one has been like trying to explain language theory using category theory, but doing it in such a way that it's accessible for everyone. So I was just wondering maybe if you could say a little bit more about that concept of trying to use some of these popular platforms to reach the masses with mathematics.
Yeah, well, you know, during the pandemic, because students were learning at home with parents, I created a Facebook page called, you know, Learning Math with Dr. Jones. And, you know, I'm doing really basic stuff, but people will say, oh, you know, you really know your math. And I'm like, no, this is really basic stuff. Let's stop and think about it. And we talked about social emotional learning and how, you know, math was traumatic for many people. And so that's why parents think that, you know, if you can do math, oh, you must really be good at it, because for many people, math was traumatic. And so we just have to change the thinking. And I think so when you go to places like YouTube, Facebook, and you have these pages where you know, maybe once a month or once a week you go on, Lou Matthews has Pie Before Dinner, I think it was called. And again, we all did this during the pandemic, but I think hopefully we can continue to do it because people look to those things. Lou would have many parents, and I would have many parents that would go onto our Facebook page just to see. And then sometimes, you know, we might be talking about a topic that their student is struggling in. part of it is just really just opening the door and saying, you can do this. These are some people who are doing it. You know, and I'll just say, and these are people who look like you in many cases, right? And then, you know, for Black folk, sometimes it's just good for all folks to see that we're doing this thing as well, right? Because a lot of times when you ask for mathematicians, like I said, you will get, you know, European males, all right? And there's I can't, arbitrarily close is I don't think it's called a podcast, but it's one of those technology things. I can't remember which one. And she has the Mathematician Project, she calls it. And she has her students learning about different mathematicians. And one time she had a mathematician, a Hispanic mathematician, and she asked the students, I don't remember the question. No, she says, oh, I know what it was. The students said, why are you always talking about these white dudes? That's exactly what the students said. And then the math teacher said, well, would you prefer, would it be okay? Or would you like me to talk about a mathematician that might be Hispanic or Latinx or however she said it? And the student said, oh, do you think there are any? And I mean, this is like in the 2000s. And so although we think that, oh yeah, of course we're out here, there are kids that have the question of, are there any Hispanic mathematicians? Because he never heard of one. So that's my point, is just broadening who we think does math. And as much as we think we're doing everything we can, I'm here to say that there's people who still don't know it. They still don't know about, you know, a lot of the people who are in these careers and in these fields. So we just got to, we have more work to do. And I know everybody here, we're doing the work, but we have to keep doing it.
Right. Yeah. And you can't end on a better note than that. So let's please thank Dr. Jones again. So we definitely enjoyed the talk, enjoyed the conversation. So thank you very much. I do want to make sure that we move on to the next speaker. I know we're kind of behind here, so I want to bring Dr. Washington to the stage, and maybe we'll give her a moment here to make sure she can share her screen. So yeah, so Dr. Washington, go ahead and try to share your screen, and then, you know, let's get started after a short little break here when you're ready.
All right. Can you share can you see it?
You can see it perfectly. All right, so
okay.
if you're ready, I can go ahead and introduce you.
Oh, go for it.
Okay. Well, it is a great pleasure to bring together another Spelman alumna, Dr. Talitha Washington, who is, let's see, I'm always confused exactly where you are now. Is it Clark Atlanta University? Is it the Atlanta University Center? Some combination of those. But she's the inaugural director of the Data Science Initiative there at the Atlanta University Center. So Dr. Washington will give us a talk on the mathematical story of a hidden figure, Katherine Johnson. Talitha?
All right, thank you. And thank you for organizing this session. I apologize if there's background noise. I'm traveling north for a family emergency, but I'm glad to be able to stop at a local Starbucks, not a commercial, but a stop at a local Starbucks and be with everybody. And Shelley, loved your presentation. So I'm going to talk about the mathematical story of a hidden figure, Katherine Johnson. And he says, yes, I'm both at Clark Atlanta and also the Atlanta University Center. And as everybody said, I am a Spelman alum. And so when I came to Spelman, I was thinking about what is this intersectionality between being a Black female and mathematician. And so my dad wrote a book, Father and Son. He said, our daughter was at the same time reading, arguing, and simulated womanism, the Black counterpart to feminism. So like they rejected the arrogance of the white female assumption that both races had suffered some patriarchal dominance. All oppressions look and feel alike. No. Black had suffered as well as the racism of the same white feminists. That's the paradox of Talitha Wangren while she was emerging as a Black woman. So really for me as a Black female mathematician, it was the challenge and the support of the Spelman Math Department that really formulated my ability to go forward. And as Zenray says, I have the privilege of being back in Atlanta. I'm the inaugural director of the Atlanta University Center Data Science Initiative. and I work across Spelman. It's great to be back home. Morehouse School of Medicine, Morehouse College, Clark Atlanta University, and also the library. So I'm busy directing, but I'm also a professor of math at Clark Atlanta, and we're funded by the United Health Group. So just a little bit, if you're not familiar, so the institutions that I serve and work with are historically Black colleges and universities, and this will come back around when I talk about Catherine. So HBCUs is the acronym. They're established prior to 1964, whose principal mission was and is the education of Black Americans. Just a few stats. HBCUs make about 3% of all institutions in higher education and enroll about 10% of Black students. And 18% of the Black STEM bachelor's degree are awarded from HBCUs. So this would be like an overproduction, right? And 1/3 of Black students who have earned STEM doctorates graduated with Black bachelor's degrees from HBCUs. So HBCUs really do train a large percentage of those who go on to get PhDs in STEM, PhDs in mathematics. So I just want to give, just kind of paint that picture, because a lot of us in this room and the people who I'm talking about, we found at least our first mathematical voice in the home of a historically Black college university, as did I. So where did Catherine Johnson start? Well, she's from West Virginia, and she was born in 1918 in West Sulphur Springs. She liked to count everything, and she said that her mother said that she was a born teacher. Her father was determined to have the students get a good education, but where they lived, Blacks couldn't get an education beyond the 8th grade. So in those days, there were boundary lines, you could eat. Like when I grew up in Evansville, Indiana, we had a railroad track. Black folks on one side, white folks on the other. So it was very separate. But Joshua Coleman, her father, knew the importance of education and moved his family 120 miles. I don't know how he did that, because I know he wasn't driving like a Mercedes or something, right? He moved his family 120 miles, this farmer, to make sure that his 4 children go to high school and college, even in this space and context. And so Catherine comes to West Virginia State College, which is a historically Black college university, which is now known as West Virginia State University. So she was 15 years old when she came in. And luckily, when she was coming in, William Claytor was a professor there. And they said he drove a sports car. Wait, we could talk about crushes, right? So Shelley had mentioned crushes. So I guess maybe William's my crush. I don't know. And the AMS recently named a fellowship after him as well. But he was 27 years old. He joined the faculty. He just came from getting his PhD. He was the 3rd Black in the United States to get a PhD in mathematics. He enrolled at Howard University as an undergrad. He was a part of Howard University's first master's in mathematics program. And he was ambitious. But in those days, if you were a Negro, you could get a position at one place. That would be a historically Black college. So he found himself there, and he found himself as Catherine Johnson's professor, or as her daughters say, research mentor. And one time he told her, he said, "You'd make a great mathematician, and I'm going to prepare you for this career." And he did that. And in those days, you did a lot of spherical geometry, things of that nature. And Catherine asked Claytor, "If I get into math, will anyone hire me?" Claytor replied, "You'll have to see. That is your problem." So he didn't let that stop him from educating her and really setting up her trajectory as a research mathematician. So recently there was a movie on the Hidden Figures, and it was filmed actually on the campus of Morehouse College. On the lower left, if you're familiar with the campus, she's actually running by, I think the math department is nearby here. And this is also on the campus of Morehouse College, which is, again, right across the street from Spelman and Clark Atlanta. So we're all clustered there together. Now, the video producer, he actually called Dwayne Cooper, who's the chair of the math department at Morehouse, and he was familiar with Morehouse. He worked with Spike Lee, who had filmed movies there like School Days and so on. So he called out Dwayne and was like, "Dwayne, I need a mathematician." And so Dwayne went and found Rudy. And, this was off of the book Hidden Figures by Marguerite Shetterly. Now, when they called Rudy's like, "I have to teach. I got linear algebra coming on. I have all these students. I can't do this." And what? Nobody knew about the book. And this was Margot's first book. It was actually funded by the Sloan Foundation. Sloan Foundation took a really big risk on this. She's not an author. You know, is this really going to take off? But nobody knew. But luckily, Margot kept writing and kept working. And Fox, they bought it up and turned it into a movie even before the book was finished. Luckily, Rudy had said, yes, I'll participate and join in. And so the mathematics that is in the movie comes from Rudy. He had to kind of sit back and think about, well, what would that math look like? And the picture at the beginning, when I showed the young Katherine Johnson, that's actually Rudy's handwriting. But Rudy would say that his handwriting was so bad that they didn't let him write anything else on the board. So, and Rudy was a math professor at Morehouse College, which is HBCU here in Atlanta. He coined a lot of the work in the movie off of this book, Hypersonic and Planetary Entry Flight Mechanics. And I went to go visit Rudy. I said, Rudy, where can I get this book? He was like, oh, I had to, go here and get the book. Well, I found it on Amazon, luckily. So this is a really interesting book. It's like an intersection between Calculus 3, differential equations, and numerical analysis, all kind of cooked in together, and spherical coordinates. So hopefully, right now I'm doing data science, but I hope to do a course in this book one day. So Rudy actually worked alongside the actors. He worked that's on him on the left, working with Taraji, because the actors really learned the mathematics like they learned lines of a script. Taraji Henson, she's a Howard University graduate. That's in DC, another HBCU. She initially enrolled at North Carolina A&T as an electrical engineering major, but didn't do so well in her classes. So she came back home to DC, and that's why she enrolled at Howard. She ended up as a theater major. So this whole having her portray Katherine Johnson, I think, was really near and dear to her heart in her first academic start as an electrical engineering major at A&T. On the right-hand side, that's Rudy working with the director, Ted Melfi, to kind of figure out how to do what should the pictures look like, what math should be drawn on the board. So at the time in the movie, they're talking about the space race. We had Sputnik 1 going up in space, Sputnik 2, the dog, Sputnik. And we're trying to get John Glenn up in space, trying to get him to go around and get him to come back safely. So we really were kind of in this race with other countries. I think now we're in a technological race, like the cybersecurity and all of the rest of that. But at that time, it was getting things in space. So just a little bit, here we have Earth in the movie. It's a cartoon. If you throw something up in the air, it's going to come back down, and it could follow, depending on how the angle you throw it. You can imagine it coming back down, forming the shape of a parabola. The idea is if you throw it up high enough that the gravity of the Earth is going to pull it down, but it's going to be in a free fall kind of going around the Earth. And so you have this thing called orbital velocity. So if you can imagine that, so how did we get this spaceship, John Glenn, going around? Well, here's just an example of how we can think about it. It's not the exact numbers, but it's an example. So if you think of O as the center of the circle or the center of the Earth, we have a radius R here, and an angle theta. We have the arc length here noted by L. And let's say we're going to go from point A to B. Now at A, we have a vector velocity, and at B, we also have a vector velocity. So if we kind of take this vector vis-a-vis and then just kind of bring it back to the other vector, we form this parallelogram. And we know that the sum of the interior angles of a parallelogram is 360 degrees, which is shown in the upper right. And so we could solve, and we have that B plus A is equal to 180. So in this case, we have, what are these called? The angle B and A is 180. And so in this case, for this one, the B is equal to theta. I think I've had too much Starbucks. But essentially what we can do is we can write out some equations, get some relationships by using similar triangles, that the change in velocity over velocity is equal to, well, velocity times change in time. That's your distance, how far you go over the radius. We can then solve for acceleration, and we can have this equation, the force due to gravity, that's mass times acceleration. We can do some substitutions and arrive at the equation that everybody likes. In this case, V is equal to the square root of the gravitational constant, m sub e over r. And m sub e, that's the mass of the Earth. So we can think of this orbital velocity going around, but when you're trying to get a spaceship up well, in this case, to re-enter, come back. So imagine if the spaceship is going around the planet Earth, it's kind of going in a free fall. The gravity's pulling it back, but you can think the spaceship just keeps missing the planet Earth. Now, the idea is if you want to come in but when you want to come in, you actually want to slow down a little bit. So the way it does it, these rockets turn around and fire when they slow, but you don't want to kind of, I guess, miss where you're going. On the upper right, that's a screenshot of Catherine in the movie, where she's actually kind of drawing out these different pathways and working out some numbers. So this is from that book I had mentioned earlier. We could imagine the circle's planet O, this O's in the middle, these dots are the atmosphere. Because once you're kind of out in space, everything's kind of thin, but you kind of come into the air. I don't know where you are, but the hot land is pretty hot and the air is thick. And when you have thick air, going to a thick medium, you're going to have friction, you're going to slow it down. You can think of more of a solid soupy flow. So your spaceship is coming around on this pathway, and you want to somehow kind of slow down, and you want to angle it in such a way that you re-enter the atmosphere, but re-enter and kind of land in a nice big place, maybe an ocean. And on the upper right, that's Catherine drawing that same picture. And again, this picture is from the book. So one of the things is you want to have, there's this entry corridor. So if you kind of, I guess it's almost like parking a car, but you kind of park it on the planet Earth. You kind of have so much wiggle room until you hit the curve, and I hit a lot of curves. So if you slow down too much, you could actually undershoot, and you can kind of crash and burn, and that's not good. If you don't slow down enough, you could overshoot and kind of miss. So you have this entry corridor that you want to get, and so you can come to Earth. And on the left-hand side, you can see the same picture on the board. That's definitely not Rudy's handwriting, where they drew that picture in the movie. Now, I don't know, can people hear sound? I'm gonna take that as a no. But okay.
Yes, I believe they can hear sound. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I didn't know. If you can't, just yell at me.
No, I don't hear anything myself.
Okay.
Someone's saying you need to click the share audio button.
Oh, well, that's too fancy. That's why we need to have to drive one. Well, I'll just talk over what she's saying. They're saying, we're trying to figure out, how do we work out these calculations? How's it going to work? So she's trying to explain to them. They're trying to figure out, how can we figure out how to get John Glenn back? And, maybe it's something that's old math, right? Something that looks like the problem that we can solve numerically, but not, theoretically. And I think that my favorite quote in the whole movie is, math is always dependable. And she just said that in that quote there. And she says, oh, it must be Euler's method. And he says, that's ancient. So the thing is, well, why would anybody use Euler's method? It's order one. Why not something else that's a higher order? These Runge-Kutta or predictor corrector method, something else, right? Well, when they were doing the movie, they kind of asked Rudy, and they kind of needed something, the fabulous Hollywood scene, right? And he said, what about Euler's method? They were like, yes, let's do that. And I could almost see Rudy going like, why are they just going off Euler's method? But Rudy actually came up with the idea of Euler's method. Now the question is, did she really use it? Maybe not. But it was good for the movie. It does make sense, because back in those days, honestly, they probably would have had a slide rule kind of walking around the office with it, like we walk around with our cell phones sort of thing. And they would have used approximation techniques. Maybe they would have used Euler's method or maybe something else, because it's not like they can throw like log 5 into a calculator to get an approximation. They would have actually had readily, they would just know what some of these approximations were, especially if they keep doing the numbers. So on the left-hand side is one of the reports that Katherine Johnson worked on. It's a technical note that she authored here, and it's determination of azimuth angle at burnout for placing a satellite over a selected Earth position. So in her work at NASA, even though I think a lot of her work is internal, and she doesn't have a PhD in mathematics, but she did do a lot of math research in this era. And so for this paper, she was looking at using spherical triangle relationships and an iterative procedure. So this actually, this paper would make for a nice semester-long directed reading to have a student kind of go through, think about these spherical relationships. There's a lot of geometry in there as well. And, you know, when you go through all of her notes and things, it does take some patience. Well, that's geometry relationships. So you can see here's the satellite. We have an elevation from the horizontal, and everything, again, it's in that spherical coordinates. And so here we have the satellite, it kind of wraps around and then comes back on the left-hand side. When you do a loop of this graph, that's doing a rotation around the planet Earth. And so her question was, given a burnout position, theta 1, lambda 1, to have a satellite pass over some selected position after n orbits. So when are we going to have this burnout so we can get this satellite position? And I know we're kind of over time, so I'm not going to go into too much detail, but she did do this approximative techniques, and it was kind of one function approximated in another one, and then she repeated this. It's almost like a fixed point iteration, almost, to figure out the perigee to equivalent position, to figure out when it converges. And y'all know she has her own Barbie doll, which I think is, I have a crush on her Barbie doll. Okay, and so she, in her paper, she does calculate the azimuth angle at the burnout, as well as the inclination angle. Here it just shows that some of the iterations that she did. Again, you can think fixed point. And whenever we do those sorts of approximations, we're looking here, the time to perigee. It starts to settle down. Once it settles down well enough, then we're happy. Now, I don't know how she did all this by hand, but hey, when you could do it, right? So, you know, for me, I'm really thankful for what Katherine Johnson did. I don't think the work that she did was for recognition. She just did it because that's what she did and she enjoyed it. And here she is on the upper right. She's at the Katherine Johnson Computational Research Facility. And Obama also presented her with a presidential medal there. And at one point, President Barack Obama said, you know, and I keep this in mind with the high pressure jobs. He said, if you think your job is pressure packed, hers meant that forgetting to carry the one might send somebody floating off into the solar system. You know, so that's an interesting perspective. So, and I remember when all the hidden figures came out, I know at least Dr. Mickens would say they're not hidden, they're just unknown. And then when I talked with my colleague at Howard, now I forget his name, in engineering, he would say, I don't know why people are making the fuss about all these Black women being computers. This was just the thing back then. And doesn't everybody know that? I said, no. Oh, Dr. Gill, Tepper Gill. I like Tepper, not everybody knows that. So there is this generation divide where I think it's important that we tell stories, that we do say who has done what, so that we don't get certain personas of, let's say, who does mathematics just be one, right? So it is good to say who we are, what we're doing, so others can learn from that. We, in 2018, there was a Hidden Figures Congressional Gold Medal Act that was passed in the House of Representatives. And it was presented to Katherine Johnson along with Dr. Christine Jordan, and posthumously to Dorothy Vaughan and Mary Jackson, who are all shown on the right. And of course, this lecture series here is, this session is to honor Dr. Christine Darder. So I just wanted to take just a sidestep here. Recently, the National Academy of Sciences put out a report, because these are some of the things I'm thinking about as a Black female in STEM. Now we're in COVID, all this persistence, resilience, all the rest of that. So if you haven't read this report, it's a really interesting report, because you can't read it on an empty stomach, so to speak. So, because in this consensus study report, it says that the work-life issues of single Black women have been largely ignored. Black women in STEM carry the additional burden of perceived stress of racism on sleep quality during COVID-19. And then also a lot of people are leaving the workforce. And then the last thing I want to point out in this report, it says how intersectionality influences the experiences of women in color in STEM remains undetermined at this time. So even in the era of Katherine Johnson, where she was the only one, she couldn't, you know, there were certain things that were afforded to her and many things that were not, just because she was a woman of color. We still have a lot of work to do even now. And I think with our current pandemic, people aren't taking notice of our current situation. And I'm hoping that we can start working to remedy and pull down these barriers and obstacles so that everybody can have access to engage in and just do math and do the work that they love to do. So with that, I'm going to close out and just give a shout out to Rudy Horn. Rudy Horn passed away in 2017. We actually got our PhDs in the same year in 2001. I knew him from when I was a grad student. He's still sorely missed in the mathematical community. I'm sure his laughter's missed. And he didn't realize what he was doing for giving Catherine's mathematical voice in this movie. But we're thankful that he did, and we're thankful that he was able to really share his mathematical expertise with the world. On the right-hand side, it's Reaching for the Moon, the autobiography of NASA mathematician Katherine Johnson. And I'm thankful for Katherine for just doing her job, doing it well, staying persistent, and just enjoying life and just seeing it through. So I encourage everybody just to stay strong, stay on your path, and be inspired by the ones who come before us who are paving the ways. And really, we stand on the shoulders of Katherine Johnson, and we also stand on the shoulders of Rudy Horn. Thank you.
Yeah, let's give Dr. Washington a round of applause. So that was a phenomenal talk. Yeah, thank you very much. There's a lot to think about, not just with Katherine Johnson, but also her mathematics, the work that Rudy Horn has done, and even really the influence of HBCUs. So yeah, wonderful. I think we maybe have time for one or two questions, and I'm looking to see if there's any questions here in the chat window. So maybe, Dr. Washington, I can start off by asking you a question. I feel that since you're at an HBCU, well, several HBCUs, you might be uniquely qualified to answer this question. Yeah, you've mentioned several things here that have caught my attention. Number one, HBCUs overproduce when it comes to bringing Blacks into STEM. And number two, the population, you said, is roughly 60% of the undergraduates at HBCUs are Black women. What are some things you think in particular HBCUs can do to help produce specifically Black women in the STEM fields?
So I know you're setting me up, because I've drank my Starbucks, right? So one of the things that I'm worried about is, I'm a mother of a Black male child, and we are having a, how do I say it? At Clark Atlanta is like 80-some% female, right? Morehouse College is having challenges in recruiting. HBCU is niche, and Howard is majority women. I want to say 76%, right? Undergraduate. So if you look across the landscape at HBCUs, we're seeing the percentage of Black female enrollment going up and the Black male enrollment going down. And for me, I'm concerned about that for the health of the Black community and also the health of our nation, because right now at this point in time, it's okay. It's cool to do stuff for Black females, women of color, women, right? That's what's cool. But if we start to carve out programs for Black men, recognizing that, if we look at predictive policing, how males have been treated in society versus females, that there are societal issues that are unique to Black males, but it's not as cool to do programs for Black males. And so I would actually like for us to figure out how we can develop programming. I know Shelley talked about really some great programming. How can we develop programming to address and pull down some of the obstacles and barriers for Black males to proceed in academics and to achieve in academics, just because their challenges are uniquely different. And for HBCUs, some of them do have Black male initiatives. I'm seeing it more in the community college space for Black and brown males, but I'm hoping that we'll pick up more initiatives for Black males, because I can't overemphasize how sorely needed it is. So I'm hoping, but I don't know how we as a community will think it's okay, let's talk about Black males, because there are challenges there that they face, and I think we need to address those before we continue this descent. So you're gonna get me on the soapbox.
Idre, you're muted.
Thanks, Dr. Raphael.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you
Oh,
very much for that. Yeah, no, Dr. Washington, thank you very much for your answer. I was trying to see if there's any other questions here. There's one
yeah,
from
there's one by
Anthony
Dr.
Edmonds.
Edmonds. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Have you ever done a directed reading course with a student on a technical report that Dr. Johnson wrote?
I want to, but then I keep getting pulled in other directions, and those are fun too. Yeah, that would be great. And I think you could do it because there's a lot of interesting geometries. It actually may make for a nice, if you had some geometry, you can take actually different parts of it. But I would actually want somebody to go through and trudge through the geometry. I kind of do it as pastime, but then also redo some of the numerics. I think that would be fun. And there's also on Mathematica where they actually, there's like a Mathematica notebook online where somebody actually has this interactive paper on how to do it and things. So I have not done that yet. I'm teaching a data science course this fall. Go figure, right? But I think that paper would make for an interesting reading course. If it was me, I would probably pull 3 students in with a little bit of programming. You had like some calculus 1, so we can trudge through some of the equations, and then I would just meet with them like an hour and a half a week, and let's have fun just playing through the equations. If I had like time in the day, I would totally do it. So, Dr. Edmonds, try it out and let me see what you think. Oh yeah,
Okay.
Dr.
Well,
I just mapped it out for you, so you got this.
well, on that note, let's please give Dr. Washington another round of applause. So again, thank you very much for a wonderful, engaging talk. So certainly do
Thank
appreciate
you.
it. Please continue to enjoy your Starbucks out there.
Yeah, I'm gonna get back on the road and head north.
Okay.
Thank you all.
Let's see. Yeah, we can take a short break. I do want to bring Dr. Weems to the stage so we can start to set up our final talk here of the session. So we'll just take a short break while we kind of get things together here. Okay. And Kim, I think are you okay with sharing your screen?
Let's see.
Okay.
Just 1 second. Oh yeah. Sorry. Okay, let me try that again.
Okay.
Oh, here we go.
Okay. Excellent.
1 second. Can you see it? Can you hear me okay?
Can see it perfectly, can hear you perfectly.
Okay, great. Excellent.
Okay, then I can go ahead and introduce you if you feel you're ready.
I'm ready.
Okay. Well, it is a great pleasure to introduce our last speaker for the day, Kim Weems, someone that I've known since we were grad students, not both at the same place, but it's been a long, long time. She is a professor at North Carolina Central University, and she'll give us a talk on Dorothy Hoover, the journey of a hidden figure from Arkansas to NASA. Kim?
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Goins, as well as Dr. Darden for inviting me to speak. I'm really happy to share this platform with my fellow panelists. And thank you to the audience members who, if you've been here since the beginning and you've hung in there to the last talk, I really appreciate your sticking around. And I'm excited to have this opportunity to talk about Dorothy Hoover. And I'd just like to give you a little bit of background before we get started. This presentation is actually based on an article that appeared in the notices in 2020, shining a light on a hidden figure, Dorothy Hoover, that I wrote with Lily Kajabi, Tanya Moore, and Yurka Wilson. And the article actually extends information that was presented at a 2017 panel at the Joint Math Meetings. It was a Hidden Figures inspired panel that featured author Margalie Shetterly, Dr. Darden, Tanya Moore, and Yurka Wilson. And I really have to give a lot of credit to Tanya Moore, who really first kind of conceived of this idea of doing a Hidden Figures, Infinite Possibilities Conference collaboration, and bringing these stories about African-American women to the broader mathematical community. And it was really at the request of Ms. Shetterly, who asked us to dig a little more deeply into the life of Dorothy Hoover. As Dr. Edmonds mentioned in her talk and in her abstract specifically, just like Eunice Grace Smith, Dorothy Hoover was somewhat hidden among the hidden figures. She's mentioned in the Hidden Figures book. There wasn't enough information for her to really be included in the movie. And Margot Lee Shetterly just knew that there was more information out there and really wanted more information about her. And since the book and the movie came out, I would say there have been at least a dozen or so articles that have been written within this time period. So the presentation that Yurka presented in 2017, we've been able to update that with a lot of the dates, a lot of the information. And one of those articles actually just appeared last week. And I'm super excited about that because there's several photos that are in that article that I was able to pull and use in my presentation today. Some of them I'd seen before, but some I've never seen. So it's very exciting for us because we all became very fascinated with her life. And we wanted to make sure that she received the recognition that she deserves. So Dorothy Hoover was born in 1918 in Hope, Arkansas. And she graduated with a degree in mathematics from Arkansas A&M College, which is now the University of Arkansas at Pine Bluff. This photo of her is from her senior year, and that appears in the yearbook. We included a similar photo in our article, but we chose the one that was so-called more professional. It's actually better, a little bit of a better photo quality, but we love this one because of the caption where she is called the most studious lady. So in college, they knew that she was destined for great things. She taught in Arkansas and then made her way to Georgia, also taught mathematics, and then decided to pursue a master's degree in mathematics from Atlanta University, now Clark Atlanta University. Her thesis was entitled Some Projectile Transformations and Their Applications. So certainly something that would lead her into her career at Langley and Goddard. The year that she graduated with her master's in math, she went to Langley, and she ended up joining the group of a prominent aeronautical engineer known as R.T. Jones. And Jones actually requested specifically for Hoover to work with him. And during that time, she was also promoted to an aeronautical research scientist. So I'm just going to focus on her early education and career right now and talk a little bit about her papers, technical reports that she did at Langley. So this is the first one. She did two. She was a co-author of two technical reports that derive the approximations related to the lift and pitch of thin swept-back tapered wings. So the lift is the force that basically keeps the aircraft in the air, and the pitch deals with the rotation of the aircraft. So these two technical reports were basically published within a month of each other. And then around 1952, she decided to make a career move, or actually return back to pursuing education. And so she resigned from Langley and went back to Arkansas and decided this time to pursue a master's degree in physics at the University of Arkansas. And basically, she's believed to be the first African-American woman to earn two technical master's degrees. We believe that she was the first African-American to earn a graduate degree in physics from the University of Arkansas. And I'll talk a little bit more about her master's thesis in just a moment. And perhaps I'll just come back to this slide, but this is her master's thesis on estimates of error in numerical integration. She was one of only 15 African-American graduate students at the University of Arkansas. And she finished her master's just a year before African-American undergraduate students were allowed to attend the University of Arkansas. And it's wonderful that she was actually able to have her thesis published in the proceedings of the Arkansas Academy of Sciences. And after she finished her second master's, she decided to pursue a PhD in mathematics. So she was awarded a John Hay Whitney Fellowship and moved to Michigan, to the University of Michigan. And she stayed there for only 3 semesters. So she did not finish her PhD. And we're not sure why she left. But after that, she moved to the Joint Numerical Weather Prediction Unit. So let me pause for a moment and talk a bit about her PhD studies and a little bit about the process, because this has really been a very much an investigative pursuit for us. We've really learned a lot about her life since the 2017 panel. We wrote to University of Michigan and requested her transcript, and there was a lot of back and forth. Why do you want this? Are you a relative? And and then the emails just ended, and I just kind of assumed, okay, we're not going to be able to get this. They're not going to give us a copy of her transcript. And then one Saturday, I went to the mailbox, and I'm like, University of Michigan. Why am I getting something from University of Michigan? Because this had been a couple of weeks later, and then I realized, and I was so excited, and I immediately texted Tanya and Lily and Yurka. I was like, guess what I have? So this is just the top part. I kept thinking, I don't know if I'd like for anybody to put my whole PhD studies transcript up. So this is just the top part of her transcript, but she did wonderfully. You can see that it shows all of her previous degrees. This is where we learned that she had passed her language exams in German and in French. And again, as I mentioned before, she spent 3 semesters here. She served as a teaching assistant. And of course, she had this Whitney Opportunity Fellowship, where you see a little bit about the fellowship below, that was to basically broaden participation. Right? We broaden participation. And so she received one of these. But after 3 semesters, she left her PhD program and moved to the Numerical Weather Prediction Unit. So she didn't miss a beat. And in this unit, she worked with meteorologists. She worked with other scientists. Basically, this was a collaborative effort to really make real-time weather prediction forecasts, which was very, very new, something very new. And this paper actually outlines 2 methods that were used to numerically approximate a solution to the balance equation, which is given here. And again, this was all towards weather prediction. And now for another career change. She spent some time at this weather prediction unit and then decided to go to Goddard, okay, so to kind of return back to, the space, NASA, and some of the work that she had done before at Langley. So she returned to, she went to Goddard Space Flight Center in 1959. And she was promoted to GS-13, which was wonderful, which was a great accomplishment for her. And this was one of the photos I mentioned that I was really excited. This was very new to me that I just saw last week. That comes from a newspaper, online newspaper, Southwest Arkansas Today. And this is one of the few photos that has a date associated with it. This is from the summer of 1966. A little bit about Dorothy Hoover at Goddard. This quote is taken directly from the Hidden Figures book. As Shetterly writes, also at Goddard was Dorothy Hoover, embarking on the third, maybe fourth or fifth act of her career. So think about what she's done. I mean, she's been at Langley, she taught before that. She had been at the Weather Prediction Unit. She has degrees in math and in physics and the titles of aeronautical research scientist. Okay. It also really emphasizes her theoretical work, as Dr. Edmonds mentioned during her talk. And during this time at Goddard, she co-authored, here it says she co-authored a book. From our research, we found out that she actually co-authored a chapter in this book that's called Methods in Computational Physics. And it's about a 60-page book chapter that presents a partial differential equation with boundary conditions that's used to model the scattering of electrons from atomic hydrogen. And there's one last thing that I did not mention. The last part, I'll say for her career, as we know it, she was an operations research analyst. So again, another kind of career title. We've heard about operations research from Dr. Ennis's talk. She was an operations research analyst at the Defense Communications Agency. So now some other scholarly activities. She was a member of Pi Mu Epsilon, the Math Honor Society, not surprisingly. She was also a member of Physics Honor Society, Sigma Pi Sigma. And one of the first, actually, this was the first photo that we obtained of her. And this is from the book jacket of her book that was published in 1970 called A Layman Looks with Love at Her Church. And just a little bit more about this book. When I first learned that she had published this book, I ran over to the library at my university and I found it, which was wonderful. I returned that copy and I decided, we were just really enamored with her. I wanted my own copy, and so luckily I was able to find one because it's out of print now. I was just checking to see, I can't really find any other copies available. But when I got my copy, it had the book jacket that had this photo. So we were really excited to get this photo of her. Also, this book, in the preface, she talks a lot about her work. So in this quote, this is a quote from the preface of the book, and ask us to accept this work in the spirit in which it was done, because she has a full-time job at the Goddard Space Flight Center. So she's working on this book on weekends, in her spare time, during her lunch breaks at work. So please accept this work in the spirit in which it was done. It may not be perfect, but this was, her passion. She was a person of deep faith. And this book is about the African American Episcopal Church. Also, in the preface of this book, we learn a little bit more about her family and the background, and again, just the importance of her religion, and of her church. Okay, there are so many people who contributed to this presentation, to the article, and to the panel, and lots of organizations that I have listed here. I'd like to thank Ms. Shetterly for inspiring us to actually look into the life and the mathematics of Dorothy Hoover, because really my colleagues and I, we've gotten so much out of learning about her story, and so many aspects of her story resonate with us. So thank you, everyone who has been involved in this project, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Let's please give Dr. Williams a round of applause. Yeah, that was a really fascinating history talk. It definitely gave us an insight in what it's like to actually try to uncover some history. So yeah, it's a really great talk. I'm trying to see if there's any questions here in the chat window. I have a question to start with. I was really interested in the time that Dorothy Hoover spent at the University of Michigan. And even though it was short-lived, there were a lot of Black mathematicians who were going through the University of Michigan at the time to get their degree. More recent ones I'm thinking of are Donald Cole, who was at the University of Mississippi, Johnny Brown, who's now at Purdue University. Do you happen to know if Dorothy Hoover overlapped with Marjorie Lee Brown? This is one who, there's a lecture series named after her at the University of Michigan these days. But I wonder if they would have overlapped.
I don't think they overlapped. And that's a great question because so Marjorie Lee Brown finished her PhD in 1950 from Michigan. And so Hoover was awarded the fellowship and started in 1954. But, if Hoover had continued along the trajectory, she very well could have been the fourth. So we know the first, Euphemia Lofton Haynes, right? And then we have Evelyn Boyd Granville, and then Marjorie Lee Brown. And really, if she had continued, it's just very likely she would have been the fourth African-American woman to earn her PhD in mathematics. Because I believe the fourth, I believe her degree was actually earned in 1960. So that's an excellent question. And like I said, we just really don't know why she left, but certainly, she had, the aptitude and to have completed.
Right. If I can follow up with that, if I remember the numbers right, Dorothy Hoover would have been in her mid to late 30s when she would have started the PhD program. Is that right?
Let's see. 1918. That was 1954. Yes, that sounds right.
Yeah. So do you know what motivated her to get a PhD in math? Even nowadays, we try to tell people math is a young person's game. Get your degree when you're in your mid-20s. But I think that she and other Black mathematicians, they decided later in their careers to get a degree. Mm-hmm. Maybe they didn't all finish, but they still started later.
That's true. I am not sure. I'm not sure if it's, the opportunity fellowships had anything to do with this. She had started her career at Langley. She left and went back to get that second master's in physics. And then after the second master's in physics, then she went back to math to get the PhD. And that's a great question. And I'm just really not sure about that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Let's see. There's a couple of questions that are here in the chat. One is, you mentioned a paper that was just printed. Where and what's the title?
Yes. Let's see if I can get that for you. I am going to try to switch. Hopefully I don't. Did I lose it? It is. I will see if I can put that in the chat. But I will tell you, if you go to, it's Southwest Arkansas Today. That is that's the online newspaper. What it is, and this was published July 27th, so just last week.
Okay, great, wonderful. Okay, here's another question by Chris Stevens. And I hope you'll be able to hear me. My audio just went out. Let's see here. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you.
Okay, great. Yeah, my earphones are dying. Chris Stevens says, having taught in Arkansas, I find Hoover's story extraordinary. Talitha talked about the impact of Claytor on Katherine Johnson. Did Hoover have any significant mentors as an undergraduate?
Not that I am aware of. She was one of two math majors at her college. The article that just came out actually talks about her father, and her father was an educator. And so he certainly encouraged her to continue her education. But that's all I know.
Okay. All right. And let's maybe ask one last question. Sylvia Boltzmann says here, at what point did Dorothy Hoover become Hoover? That is, get married.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder how that affected her trajectory.
Right. That's a great question. So I do know that when she started in Arkansas and then she moved to Georgia. She got married before she finished her master's at Atlanta University, because if you look for records of her thesis, that thesis is under a different name. And right now I can't remember it. I'll check my notes. I have my notes right here. Clark, that is under the name of Clark. So her thesis at Atlanta University is under Clark. And then that marriage ended. She married a second time. And that was the name Hoover. So that's when she became Hoover. And I'm not exactly sure though when she married Hoover.
Okay. All right, great. Thank you. All right, well, can we please thank Dr. Weems again? So I really enjoyed this talk. It was certainly a fascinating story, and I definitely appreciate it, everything that you and your collaborators have done to try to uncover all of this.
Thank you.
So I'm thinking, before you all go, I know that we are far, far over time. I've asked Dr. Darden to maybe come back just to say a few words of goodbye. So I'm going to try to bring all of our panelists here. If all of you could just stay on for a quick minute. Tasha, I'm going to try to bring you back to the screen if I can. And I'm hoping that Christine can sign on here. And I do know that there's another session happening right now, the award ceremony, so it won't take very long. But let's see if Christine can. Oh, there we go. All right.
And let me see.
Okay. Yep, Christine, you're on.
And then that's how I cleared it up before. Am I on?
Yes, you're on.
We can see you. We can hear you.
Yes. Well, one of the things that I told Dr. Goins is I taught high school. I taught math and physics in high school and a little bit in college too. And I always had male students tell me, why in the world do I have to learn this equation? What am I going to ever use it for? And I said, you know what? If the teachers answered those questions and said what that was used for, it would get a lot more of the males interested, I think, in the mathematics that is related to that equation. And it's in it, and make sure it's where it is in the real world, because most people don't know how much mathematics is used in the real world.
All the time.
And I think and so I think that really would help interest a lot of our young men in something if they understood kind of what was going on there and everything. But you ladies have done an absolutely wonderful job today, and some of you I remember, some of you I've met, and you have done a great job. And I heard about Dorothy Hoover in Atlanta, I think, when you all gave that when Margot Shetterly was down there. And you all gave that presentation. So keep up the good work, ladies. Mine didn't come over as well as theirs. I did a lot of and everything in my talk, but I'm supposed to talk on Friday. Yeah, and talk about what I had to learn about the sonic boom and how we solve that sonic boom and everything, and why students today don't hear the sonic booms. But I heard a lot of them when I was a kid. Because there's a law on the books right now that their commercial airplanes cannot fly over the continental United States.
Because of that boom.
And,
I said
Well,
because
yeah,
that
because
boom.
they had booms. Because they
Yeah.
had booms, the law was passed that no commercial airplanes could fly over the United States. And so they passed a law in 1971, and it's been there ever since. And I enjoyed my career at NASA Langley, really did, and gave talks in overseas at several different countries about sonic boom stuff. And but
Dr.
you all
Darden.
did great.
Oh, sorry.
Yes,
Do you mind if I take a picture?
go ahead. I didn't get the chance to dress up, but
I'm not posting it. I just want it for myself. Is everybody okay with me taking a picture? All right. 1, 2, 3. All right, got it. Edre, I'll send it to you.
Dr. Darden, you are an inspiration and your research has been so impactful. So we are all so very excited to hear your talk on Friday. So we are just honored to be celebrating you.
Absolutely.
well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Darden.
You're quite welcome, Ms. Farabee.
We just named, one of you mentioned the Nesby Jr., the links chapter that Dr. Darden and I are in. I just started a Nesby Jr. chapter.
Mm-hmm. Nice.
And they honored me by naming it the Christine Darden Nesby Jr. chapter.
That's
Nice.
wonderful.
That's a great honor. I love that. Isn't
Yeah,
that nice?
that was great. That was great.
Nesby Jr. There you go.
Exciting.
And their first lesson was about sonic boom. And we did a hands-on virtual activity.
That's right. That's right. Well, I had to learn about it too, you know.
When you
So you
were
ready for me to leave?
how
excuse
so
me?
how did you when you were how did you come into working on sonic booms at Langley? Were you just sort of assigned a lot of readings or?
Well, part of the thing was all of the first supersonic flight was in 1947, and then they did some research. But in 1971 is when I just finished telling you they passed this law. Boeing had all these airplanes flying over Oklahoma City, and they did over $1 million worth of damage that they had to pay the people in Oklahoma to pay for the damage done to their homes. But that was about the same time that I went. I was in the computer office. That's where I was assigned when I got there. And I asked one of the ladies in the office, I said, why are all the women in the computer offices and all the men in the engineering offices? Is it because they all have engineering degrees? And she said, absolutely not. There's several men over there that have math degrees. I said, is that so? I said, well, then I am going to find out why I am stuck in a computer office with a math degree and he is in an engineering office with a math degree. And that's what I did. I went to the director and said, why, if a male and a female come here with about the same background, why are the jobs that they are assigned to so very different? And he looked at me and he said, nobody has ever asked me that question before. I said, well, I'm asking it now. and 2 weeks later, I got transferred to engineering and working on the sonic boom, because the sonic boom was still a real problem to deal with supersonic flight.
It is very inspiring. It's like your advocacy for yourself. I love it.
Yes. My mother told me I had to learn how to speak up.